are live, I think at any rate. Welcome to the medieval sewing party with the creative Contessa. I am the Contessa, and today we're going to start, of course, with the traditional getting dressed, and then we will follow up with the continuation of making my new Burgundian gown. So first off, of course, as always, just let me know if you can hear me or not. That's always the important part. Starting with the getting dressed today, I will be getting dressed in the 15th century Burgundian underlayers as appropriate for the style of gown that I will be sewing as we talk together. And so, of course, here we have me in my linen smock. As I was saying yesterday, this one, I just finished it. It's my brand new one, and I clearly made it for someone who's about 10 inches bigger than I am. Something went completely wrong with the with the measurements and the layout. And I've been thinking about ways I could possibly take it in. I could take it in by adding a seam all the way down the front. I could take it in by not really easily doing something on the sides, and I think I might just leave it the way it is as a cautionary tale to myself. Wow, Takeda and Susan, welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
I'm here as well.
And apparently,
I'm on as well.
Yes, I saw you. I didn't think I needed to say hello to you because you're there. Right, so I have stumbled into a very interesting debate that I wasn't really tracking, despite being someone who specializes in 15th century clothing. The debate about whether the wasp waist look in men is achieved by a tight lacing garment that reduces your weight, or is achieved by the fitness efforts of men in this era and the relative lack of refined sugars and refined carbohydrates in the 15th century, or it's achieved by padding out the chest and creating a visual effect of waist being smaller, or if it's just an artist's fantasy, similar to, I would say, Playboy or Playgirl, for instance, in the case of men, Playgirl, where the models that we see depicted in those pages are not necessarily representative of what actual 14th and 15th century men looked like in daily life. I was really, this was not on my bingo card for the year, the debate about men tight lacing, and the funniest part about this debate is that there are a lot of men in the 15th century reenactor world who are very pro tight lacing. It's I felt like I'd fallen into through the looking glass, basically. That was pretty interesting to read everyone's comments, some people's statements that have nothing to do with actual, sources and just kind of feelings and observations. Yeah, it's interesting. So the one side of the debate says that yes, the doublets are designed to cinch the waist and actually cause a loss of inches. There's actually a three-way war happening. The other is that it's not really so much in the waist, it's in the shaping of the pieces of the doublet and padding it out so that you get that rounded look in the chest, and adding layers of padding into the chest to get the pigeon-chested look. And then there are those who say that, well, actually, none of this is true. It's artist's fancy trying to depict an idealized male form. You can see that because then when you see a naked man, he still magically has that cinched in waist. And that in any case, there may have been some ideal young men who had that not even hourglass, wasp waist, chalice-shaped figure, but that was an ideal that was most likely not achieved by the majority of people. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, actually. I think, as always, when it comes to my interpretation of history and the sources and my understanding of it all, is that it's almost never A, B, or C, it's ABC. Yeah, so let me just check the comments. I'm definitely not that shape. Well, and so, Takeda, to be fair, you are not a 20-something-year-old. So one of my theories is that 20-something-year-olds could possibly have easily achieved that shape with a doublet that didn't require very much tight lacing, honestly. Now, was it fitted in the waist? Absolutely. It needed to be. because these doublets are supporting, by the end of the 15th century, end of the 14th century, into the entirety of the 15th century, these doublets are supporting hosen. Tight. Why is that? Why are we reconnecting? I have no idea. There should be no connectivity issues. I'm right next to the router. Let me know if you all had, if you missed something, and if so, what it is you missed, and I will repeat it. Right. So, you know, the men's doublets would have to absolutely be fitted in the waist, tightly fitted, because they're going to support hosen. And if the hosen pull and the waist isn't tight, then the whole doublet will just kind of pull into this shapeless thing. And it's also better if the weight is on your waist and your hips from your hosen and not pulling from your shoulders, right? If it pulls, if the weight of your hosen pulls from your shoulders, and that's going to give you all kinds of, I don't know what on earth is happening here. Yeah. So there is that. Oh, my love, I'm certain they're going to want you to come and tinkle on your lute again. Yeah, Ryan is not that shape either. Right. So yes, should there be some tightening? Absolutely. But do I really think that the average person was walking around taking inches off of their waist all the time, every day? No. And why do I think that? Because most of the men who are making these statements don't live in these clothes every day for 365 days a year. In fact, I don't think any of them. So I don't think any of them have actually dealt with the consequences of a tight lace garment at a time. Now, some people say, well, it'll just get more comfortable with time. But I'm going to tell you that as someone who has worn Victorian style corsets, it doesn't actually get more comfortable with time if it's actually pulling in on. Right. So yeah, I would better believe someone who's actually really seriously lived in these garments for a whole year, rather than someone who's worn these crazy tightly laced garments for just a couple of days, or even just a day, or even not a whole day at a time. Right. But that being said, there is some evidence in a text written by Geoffroy de Charny, Geoffroy de Charny, as he would be pronounced in his proper French. And he actually complains about young men tight lacing. He says it is not a manly look, and it's yielding to fashion. And he also talks about overly tight lacing restricting their motion. So that's why I'm pretty certain that tight lacing may have been a thing that was done, but it's recommended against because it actually restricts your movement, as per one of the, most famous knights and sources for modern knights these days. Okay, well, I'm all dressed, and you may have noticed I actually started in my kerchief today, and that is because I'm actually doing an experiment with my hair, with the creating ringlets in the Florentine fashion from the 1480s. We actually did this experiment doing finger ringlets and tying them with yarn and leaving it in overnight. And because I'm not getting dressed in 15th century Florentine fashions, I'm leaving it in until later on when we undo the yarn and we see how the test works and how we like it. And if it works out, then I'll do a tutorial on this new no chemical, no heat method of creating ringlets in the Florentine fashion. But I should make it clear that my hair is naturally wavy. It's naturally curly when it's humid. So it is more likely to take a curl. If you have, really heavy straight hair, this method will absolutely not work. You'll have to use some of the chemical methods or extreme heat methods to achieve ringlet curls. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the sewing. Oh,
so you know how cats chirp at birds?
Yes.
Chimmy was doing that to your clothing, like something was in there.
Okay, that's disturbing. My cat apparently was chirping at my clothing the way cats chirp at birds when they're trying to hunt them, in the least effective way to hunt any animal. Okay, let's get down to the sewing part. I'm all dressed, wearing my kirtle. Oh, I'm bling up today, actually. Handsome. So you might need to, the connection keeps dropping, apparently.
We had problem. Remember, we lost internet last night.
Oh my gosh. Lori, it's lovely to see you back. Apparently we are having connectivity issues and I apologize for that. I hope it improves as we I think it's the Wi-Fi. I think it's our oh, they're doing construction. Actually nipped something. They make sure.
Again.
Yeah.
Last time it was the water.
It keeps saying connection lost, reconnecting, connection lost, reconnecting. Could you bring the Ethernet cable forward, make sure the connection is still on it? Well, I plan on blinging up today. I haven't blinged up in a while. And, you know, I do enjoy doing things that trigger certain pedantic, overly stiff reenactors. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to be putting on my beautiful Armor and Castings Maria Portinari collar. I'm just going to pop on some of my other bling. Why not?
Just plug it in.
Yeah, just plug it in. Plug it in, plug it in. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and bling up.
Did you remember to
Did I remember to
mirror?
work? No. Oh, it automatically is mirroring. Or, well, showing me as I'm looking at it anyway. Okay. So this collar is a replica. Some of you know, but I'll say it again. Is a replica of the collar depicted on Maria Portinari, or Maria Baroncelli, as she was known before she got married. It's depicted in what is presumed to be a betrothal portrait of her by Hans von Memling, and then it's depicted about 10 or 15 years later on her in a very famous altarpiece by Hugo van der Goes that is in the Uffizi. I'm confident I just butchered his name, but I don't know how. Honestly, I don't know how Dutch pronunciation conventions really work. Anyway, in the Uffizi, and she's depicted wearing this exact same collar 10 or 15 years later, which tells us that it's a real collar and not just an artist's fantasy, because two separate artists depict her wearing it. And Armor and Castings has done a replica of it. So if you like this collar, you can absolutely purchase a replica of it from them. This thing is fantastic. It weighs about a pound, I think we determined. Okay, I'll just turn off the Wi-Fi and make any hair bling today. No hair bling because I'm covering everything up. But I do plan on doing a Handsome. Could you move the light forward, please?
In the process of buying a house and moving in. That's why Lori's not been around.
Oh no, I know, Laurie. You've been so busy. You've been so busy with real life. She's a fellow spouse, as it were. So.
No.
Mary, good morning. Good morning. Thank you for joining us again. Welcome back. So yeah, I know that a lot of reenactors, 15th century reenactors, serious reenactors, become very upset when I wear this collar with just my kirtle. But I am currently depicting a noblewoman in her private quarters, sewing with her closest companions. And I am decided that humans are humans.
What?
Yeah. Humans are humans, not just women. Men and women both like bling. I know there was a needle in here. Did you take the needle out?
No.
Did the kitties take the needle out?
Probably.
Oh.
I don't know. Did you look on the others?
Oh no, here it is. Got it. My needle that I stuck in the tapestry last night. So humans are humans, people are people. We like bling. We're basically all want to be pretty and fancy. And so I see nothing counter to human nature for a lady, capital L, when she's in her chambers to be wearing just the base layers for comfort and ease of motion and activity, and also putting on a layer of bling. Now, some people insist this sort of collar would only ever be worn in very special occasions, but there are court records of merchants being robbed of their collars while they are traveling. They are waylaid by highwaymen, or whatever they were called in the 15th century. I think they're just called thieves.
Music for Earthworms is here too.
Waylaid by thieves in the 15th century and having their collars stolen, which means they were not on a special occasion. They were literally just traveling from point A to point B wearing a collar, and it was stolen. So I contend that a noble woman, a woman, lady of rank and or means, would be perfectly happy in the privacy of her quarters to just put on the 15th century equivalent of her Lululemon yoga pants, to wit, kirtle and smock, but still also bling it up a little bit or a lot with one of her favorite pieces. And this is one of my favorite pieces. So there it is. Fight me. Oh, Handsome, could you lower the ring light, please, to actually put it square on the... He wandered away. Okay.
So I was trying to set up for the loop. What did you want me to do? Lower.
It had cleared up and connection is good. Okay, music, thank you. I've attached it. It must be a Wi-Fi issue. I don't know what's going on there. I've hardwired myself into the net. The light, bring it down so it's actually square on the thing. So it's actually on me because now it's not on me.
What?
Okay, so basically, yesterday we left off. I'm working on my new Burgundian gown. That is the layer that would go over this, and that for some of my fellow reenactors would make it perfectly okay for me to be wearing this collar. And I am attaching a piece on the bottom of each of the back pieces to lengthen the panel so that I have enough to actually give it a little trail. And as I discussed yesterday, I'm not interested in having a really long, huge train on this because I already have 2 gowns with really huge, long trains. And while they're fun and lovely to wear around, sometimes I don't want to be dragging an extra 50 pounds of friction behind me. No, the dress doesn't weigh 50 pounds, but I figure with the addition of the coefficient of friction, the amount of effort it can take to actually drag around a train, depending on the surface, can be pretty extensive. So basically, I'm just going to be whip stitching these pieces on together. That's all I'm doing. I'm just going to whip stitch at the very bottom of the back panel to the sort of top of the piece that I'm adding on. And the whip stitch is going to allow me to actually open the pieces up, and then they will just lie flat and abut each other. I can get away with this because this is doeskin, this is broadcloth, this is fulled wool, and it does not fray. It does not, you'll see there's no threads hanging off, even though that's a cut edge. So you can get away with not finishing an edge on wool that is properly fulled. And that is how also, by the way, all of those beautiful ornamental dagged edges you see in the 14th and 15th century, and actually starting in the 12th century, honestly, all those beautiful dagged edges where it's either strips or it's little oak leaves or some other shape hanging from the edges of the garments. Those edges aren't finished. They don't need to be finished because they're wool and it's fulled wool. And so all you have to do is take your stamping tool and stamp them out. They don't even use scissors probably to cut the shaped ones. There's a stamping tool, an edged stamping tool, like a sharp blade basically, and you just literally hammer the shapes out.
Did we get one?
I thought we got one. I'm pretty certain we got one, didn't we? I don't know where.
We did too. Is that this thing?
I thought we got a stamping tool for dagging somewhere. Oh no, this is a pinking tool.
One.
So this is a pinking tool, but also it's a buttonholer. So the same idea. You don't use scissors to cut your buttonholes. You use this tool. All you do, it's a blade. You put it on the fabric and you hammer it, and it literally slices it open perfectly and cleanly, no mess. Every buttonhole exactly the same size. How nice is that? Yeah. Will I kilt the kirtle? Nope, no need to kilt it because I'm not moving anywhere. If we go outside, I will, and I do go outside dressed like this on a daily basis here in Korea. Yes, I will kilt the kirtle because modern city streets are dirty. And the kind of dirt that is on modern city streets is not the nice kind of dirt that was on medieval streets. Here you've got brake dust and exhaust and pollutants all over the place, and I don't want that being swept up into my skirts. So when I walk around out here outside, if I'm on the pavement, I absolutely kilt up my skirts. Also, most medieval cities weren't paved. So yeah, that's pretty loud. Most medieval cities weren't paved. So that means that you only have...
It's never that loud.
It is always that loud. You've just never noticed it before. Sorry about that, everyone. The condottiero is setting up a table so he can have a place to place his music stand, so he can provide you with some tinkly lute music in the background. Yeah. So yeah, the modern streets are paved, which is extra deleterious to the bottoms of skirts, right? Soft mud or dirt or grass doesn't really tear up the hems of garments very much. Pavement eats through fabric like you wouldn't believe. So when I'm actually walking around in a modern city, a paved area, especially with rough pavement, I always kilt my skirts, even though a medieval person may or may not have done so. They wouldn't have necessarily felt the need. Yeah. Is it bad that I use my good wood chisels for cutting buttonholes? Nope, Takeda. As far as I can tell, someone actually asked a very good question. I think it was Igorani. She asked me, is there any difference between using a chisel and a buttonholer? And I said, well, actually, no, not really. I mean, maybe depends on how long the handle of the chisel is, right? Because the buttonholer is very relatively small. And so you have less potential wobble between because it's a smaller fulcrum. So that's the only reason that getting a proper buttonhole might actually be the better idea. But you know, if you've got the chisels already, why not use them?
And they're not too wide.
Yeah, and exactly. If it's the right width for your buttonholes, go for it. Absolutely. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone who is just joining us. Happy Thanksgiving for those of you who celebrate, and welcome to my medieval sewing party. I am the Creative Contessa. Today I am working on a new Burgundian gown, and I will be holding forth about topics of medieval fashion history, medieval material culture, and medieval history in general. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions you all have. So yeah, if you have any questions about anything you've seen in any of my videos or any of my posts and you want further clarification, now's a good time to get it. And for those who are not familiar, on my YouTube channel, I have a whole bunch of long format videos on a wide array of topics if you're interested in diving into more depth in any given subject. And as I'm doing this whip stitch to attach this wool to this wool, this is where I'm just going to remind you, if you are sewing any garment in any era, make sure that your seams are weaker than the fabric, so that if there is some kind of violent force or even passive force that is applied to your garment, enough to cause a tear, that the tear happens to the stitches, which are easy to redo, instead of the actual fabric itself. Yeah. Would Starbucks let you have a dance class at their store? How do they feel about the live vlog? In Korea, pretty much Koreans are numb to live streams happening. Live streams happen everywhere all the time here. So they don't care about that. A dance class would be problematic because it would have to be in the courtyard. And there are people who actually drink and eat in the courtyard as well. So I think that would be not so welcome. And definitely I couldn't do a dance class inside one of the two spaces because they're covered in people. It wouldn't be a good thing. Now, that being said, it is nearly always worth asking, but I think the noise in the Starbucks would make a dance class untenable, honestly. Yeah.
Let me know if it's too loud.
Yeah, do let us know if the tinkling is too loud. Or if it's somehow unpleasant. So back to the debate about the corset training for men in the 14th and 15th century. And I use the word corset in the modern sense, not in the 14th or 15th century sense, because the word does exist, but it doesn't have anything like the same meaning that the word corset has now. So yeah, the debate is whether the wasp waist, I think the crux of the matter is the wasp waist that we see in art, how representative of that is of daily practice, daily life practice, general practice. How widespread was it actually? Was it just the artists, depicting people in the fashion that was desirable, in the silhouette that was sought after but not really ever attained, or was it actually attained? And that brings me back to my comment by Geoffroy Duchagny, who says that, that young men he complains about young men tight lacing, and he says that it actually restricts their movement and that it prevents them from doing what it is they need to do. so the fact that he's complaining about it in his book about knighthood and how to be a knight and how to do the things you need to do. Oh, maybe Busiko. Sorry, it's not Shiny. It's Busiko. I think it's Busiko who complains about the tight lacing. Sorry. Apologies. Busiko. I'm confident there's probably going to be some smarmy comment now. And when this video posts, it's Busiko. Busiko complains about the youth dressing in being in tight lacing over much. And my thought is, if that's being mentioned in what is a very practical instructional manual, then probably it's an issue that was actually happening. But he specifically, I believe, if I recall correctly, he specifically is aiming that comment at young men, not at the general population. And so that's when I say you need to go to actual portraits. Actual portraits are very rare. In the 14th century, portraiture is just starting in the second half of the 14th century. And again, it can be hard to tell how much of a portrait is idealized, how much of it is representative. But in the 15th century, when you start getting the ultra hyper realism of the Flemish painters, then we can start seeing some things. And so by, say, the 1440s, we have portraits of men who are not just young men, not just young, beautiful men, but 40s, 50s, 60s, and older. And I'm thinking of Nicolas Rollin, the very famous rags to riches chamberlain of the Duke of Burgundy, of Philip the Good. Right? He actually is depicted kneeling, so you can see him entirely, and he does not have a wasp waist. So I think there is definite evidence that at a certain age, one might give up the wasp waist look or use other methods to make sure one's doublet has the right silhouette, even if your waist doesn't actually reflect that. Kaylee, welcome. So lovely to see you. Oh, Kaylee, go ahead. What's your stepdaughter's question? Let it rip. Yeah, let me, unfortunately, of course, as always, there is some kind of lag. Okay, she recently got to watch K-pop Demon Hunters. I know K-pop Demon Hunters. I hate this thing. I hate it when you touch it. It makes it go blue and then I can't see it. She recently got to watch K-pop Demon Hunters. No idea. I haven't seen it, but I've heard about it. Is it actually based on Korean mythos? If it is, where can I learn more about the history behind it? Okay, so I haven't seen K-pop Demon Hunters.
I've seen one episode, and I don't think so.
No, but my impression of the brief, like I've seen segments that just kind of play on Netflix when I log in, is that it's not based on a real mythos. No. Now, I would recommend going ahead, and there are books on Korean mythology. Like literally you can find books in English on Korean mythology. We have a couple of collections of folktales actually from Korea, which will give you a framework. But the specific scenarios that are being presented, not so much. Now, in general, the traditional historical, Korean cosmos.
Definitely, it's heavily based on the mythology of the creatures and stuff. Obviously, the storyline.
Yeah. So that's what I was about to say. The creatures are correct, right? Those are mythological creatures that are part of the historical Korean cosmos and the historical Korean mythology, but the stories are not. So that's why I was about to tell you to go ahead and get a good book on Korean mythology, and that will provide a really good basis to better understand what's happening in the story. Because for many Koreans, like they grew up with these tales, they grew up hearing these stories as children, or just kind of being surrounded by it. So everything makes sense. But if you don't have that basis in just the basic mythology of the types of creatures, these supernatural beings, what's the difference between a god and a demigod, what is actually a demon, which is not what a demon is in the West, right? So I really do recommend finding a fun book on just general book on Korean mythology. I don't have one, I don't think, so I can't recommend one offhand. But yeah, K-pop Demon Hunter it uses the creatures from Korean mythology, but it gives them new stories. And that's kind of the fun in it, right? Like it takes these old ancient tales, and it gives them a completely new twist.
It's taking the shamanism ritual of using song and dance to talk to the spirits.
Right. So
updated it to K-pop.
Right. So the tradition is that shamans and people still engage the services of shamans here in Korea, by the way. The idea is that shamans traditionally and historically use music and dance to engage with the spirits and the demons and the gods and the demigods, right? The whole cosmos. And so the idea here is to update that shaman tradition with K-pop music and K-pop dance to engage and communicate with the spirits. Lily, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Let's see. That's good to know. She's really taken a shine to it, is really interested. So fostering a love of history, even if it's not the typical story. Yeah, so absolutely. I think this would be a great way, a great bridge for her to actually start exploring the traditional and historical Korean mythology. And I promise it will make everything make a lot more sense. There are many times where I'm watching a K-drama or a Korean movie, and I get the references because I'm familiar with the history and with the cosmos, this mythology. But then I realized, like, a Korean Odyssey wouldn't make any sense if you don't know anything. And it's not just Korean, it's like Asian, because, you know, there's a shared mythos between Korea and China, the Monkey King, all of that, you know, that's another. I would definitely recommend that you read up on the Monkey King and all of his exploits, because, you know, Journey to the West and all that, because that will help K-pop demon hunters make more sense, for certain. And I can also recommend a Korean Odyssey. It's a really fun K-drama that also modernizes and updates traditional and historical Korean and Eastern Asian mythology. Really amusing, and, you know, doesn't have a sad ending, but doesn't have a sacred Hollywood ending either. I'll just say that. It's a good series, very enjoyable. The humor is pretty fun. It's a lot zany, and you definitely have to suspend your disbelief at every single turn. But it's literally about mythical beings, so your belief should kind of be suspended just from the get-go, right? So is anyone out there working on projects? Is anyone out there trying to fight the food baby that they developed, if you are American and or celebrated American-style Thanksgiving? So just to bring everyone up to speed, I'm working on my new Burgundian gown, and I am currently attaching one panel of wool to the back panel so that I have enough fabric in the back to be able to cut out a nice little trail. I'm calling it a trail because it's not really a train in the sense my trains go, but and so I'm whip stitching it. And when you're doing whip stitches, pro tip, when you are sewing anything by hand, I highly recommend that I usually do it every 10 stitches or so, but I got talking, so I forgot to. Every 10 stitches or so, I've put a knot in, so that if the stitches rip, they don't rip further than they need to, right? They don't unravel. The whole seam doesn't unravel. It's only a little segment of your sewing that unravels. And why have I taught myself to put a knot in every 10 stitches or so? Yeah, you probably can guess. So this is my kerchief. This is it's called a couvre-chef or a cover-chef or a kerchief or a kerchief. A kerchief, there's like 20 spellings in English. In French, it's called a couvre-chef, uniquely. And then the English got a hold of that word and abused the hell out of it for about 200 years. So this is a style that is specific to France, Burgundy, the Low Countries, Flanders, Netherlands modernly, Belgium and Netherlands modernly, and we do have evidence of people wearing them in England as well, although they seem to get to England later. Like, they seem to reach England in around 1490s. Meanwhile, in Flanders, they'd been wearing them for a couple of decades before that. So I'm just going based on the visual evidence, but, you know, sometimes visual evidence can lie. And there can be a bias in the kind of visuals that are either preserved or that survive or that are created and survive. And I'm going to be, I think I've decided I'm going to do a workshop over Christmas, the Christmas break, the Christmas period on this, because I think a lot of people might have some time off and will want something creative to do. So it's going to be a 3-part Zoom workshop. You can purchase access on my creativecontessa.com website under workshops. And it will be 2 hours, 3 times via Zoom, live, interactive. I will show you how to lay out and draft the pattern, how to cut properly. We'll talk about hand stitching techniques. We'll assemble it together step by step. There'll be some homework in between each session so you can, because hand sewing takes time, so that you're ready to go by the next session. And so it will probably be over about a 2-week period over Christmas. So it will be, as always, because I believe that creativity should be accessible to everyone, and I'm not a greedy person, but I do need to make a living from this. Literally, the machines ate all my other careers. It will be a pay what you can format. So when you check out on the class, you just enter in the tip field whatever it is you can afford, or whatever it is you feel is whatever value you think you'll get out of the hands-on step-by-step workshop. The nice thing about the Zoom format is that we can see each other. I can look at what you're doing. I can actually guide you directly and tell you what you're doing correctly or incorrectly in real time.
Your finger, that's a great thimble. Somebody just said.
Yeah.
Your finger splint.
My finger splint. Yeah. My armor thimble. Yeah, this thing. This is where I had a biopsy last week from the infected joint of my finger that's been infected basically for 6 weeks, or has had something wrong with it, has a rash for 6 weeks. And so they did a punched biopsy. And so there's 3 stitches there. And this thimble keeps me from bending it reflexively or accidentally or intentionally. Yeah. It's okay, everyone. So far, the test results are fine. Some of you were asking. So far, every result that's come back has been negative for fungus or bacteria. There are only 2 cultures outstanding. They'll take another 2.5 weeks. So I'll keep you apprised if anything comes back. But otherwise, it seems like it was possibly a reaction to a piece of glass that I had in my finger. And it's just my body kind of turning on itself. Now that the glass has been removed, it's slowly going back to normal. So yeah.
Do you want the past comments?
Yes, please.
Kaylee says, I'm working on a knot period ball gown for me and my stepdaughter for a masquerade ball in January.
Love it. Love it, Kaylee. Fantastic. A ball gown. That's lovely. I also enjoy making modern things as well. Yeah. Go on.
Susan says, what about calling it a tail since it's smaller than a trail?
Since it's smaller than a trail. A tail. I'm worried, Susan, that if I call my trail a tail, there's going to be all sorts of cheeky comments. Although engagement is engagement. So yeah, what the hell? I'm working on a tail for my dress.
Furries. Miriam Augusta says, working on a smock still. Asked, did you prepare any Thanksgiving food?
Yes. Question was, have I prepared any Thanksgiving food? I actually made the day after I got this biopsy. So fresh stitches, I made 9 pies from scratch, and I made the pastry dough from scratch, and I don't have any appliances currently and accessible. So I had to make pastry dough, flaky pastry dough for 9 pies by hand using a pastry cutter. And yeah, so I made 3 pumpkin pies, 2 lemon meringue pies, and 3 apple pies. And of course, everything was from scratch. I don't use pre-canned items. Okay, that's not true. I did use canned pumpkin, but just pumpkin, not pumpkin pie mix. Just because I definitely didn't have time to get pumpkins, cut them, and cook them down. Yeah, so yep, I made a whole bunch of pies. That was last week for a Thanksgiving event that's part of the Daegu International Women's Association, of which I'm a member. And it was an event that the international team specifically held to share American culture with Koreans. And it was super popular. It was a really great event.
But could you talk of what you know of unicorns?
Yes, I can.
There's one behind you, so.
Yeah, there's one behind me. Oh, they can't.
Because it's the other direction.
Oh, hold on a minute. Yeah. Can they see the unicorn behind me? Everyone, do you see the unicorn in the tapestry? Yeah.
I'm way behind on the thing.
You are.
Okay, there we go. Let's see here.
There
you go.
I can, but I will talk about unicorns in a minute.
Air conditioner.
Air purifier, not conditioner. Yeah. It's an air pure. Oh, yeah, there's a purifier and an air conditioner. There was a comment about something, glad that we live in the 21st century. Yes.
Thank you for the information. Funny how fashion even seems to come out of France.
Yeah,
symbol stuff.
Yeah, so the 21st century, yes. People often ask me, would you like to live back in the 15th century? No. At most, I would like a window, like in a zoo, right? I would like to be on this side of the glass, looking at the zoo of the 15th century. That would be perfectly sufficient and more than and plenty for me to experience the 15th century. And it's not a question of, oh, it was so violent and blah blah blah. I mean, there are yes, especially in France in the 15th century during the 100 Years' War. It is a brutal time to be in France. It really is, especially, God forbid, you're a peasant out in the countryside. Those Armagnac knights are coming through and pillaging and raping and burning left, right, and center. Right? It's nightmarish. But actually, it's just the microbes that give me cause for concern, and the lack of antibiotics and the lack of vaccinations. It really is. It all comes down to that. That's where I really just don't want to even deal with it at all. Yeah, so yeah, grateful to be in the 21st century, 100%. Thank God for antibiotics and antimicrobial creams and vaccinations. My grandmother probably wished almost every other day of her life that the polio vaccine had existed when she was a child, because she contracted polio. She had a very curved spine, and it is literally eventually what killed her. She did live to be 72, but literally her organs being crushed in by the extreme curvature of her spine is what killed her in the end, caused congestive heart failure. Yep.
Window, not TARDIS. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a one-way window where we could look into the past.
Exactly. A window, not a TARDIS into the past would be plenty for me. Okay.
Contessa, have you ever been to France?
I have been to France. Yes, I studied. J'ai étudié à l'Université de Paris. Yeah, I studied at the University of Paris for a semester on an exchange program. So yeah, I lived in Paris. I lived on the left bank of the Seine in the 6e arrondissement. I went running every morning in the Jardin des Tuileries or in the Jardin du Luxembourg. Went to the Louvre every other day because as a student, I had free access to just go and admire. I went to the Cluny all the time. Yeah, I've traveled all around France. I love France. I really do. I will tell people, and I will stand by this, that the French are not the snobs that especially Americans think they are. People in Paris are a little jaded, but that's big city jaded. I mean, you can get the same kind of experience in certain parts of Seoul, honestly. But out in other parts of France, yeah, people are super friendly and warm and welcoming and just a really great country. I love France. Yeah, I could happily live in France again, easily. Yeah, the Sorbonne, yeah, it was an amazing experience. Very different from an American university experience, though. It's not the way they do lectures and the way they do assignments and all that. It's just not the same. But that was 23 years ago. So things may have changed. 22 years ago. So things may have changed, right? Or 23. Yes. Sorry, I was just making sure it's right. Yeah, 22 years ago. So things may have changed. Unicorns. Questions about unicorns. Okay, so unicorns in the Middle Ages. So first off, what most people think of now as a unicorn is not necessarily what through most of the Middle Ages people would have envisaged when they thought of a unicorn. If you look, the further back you go, the uglier unicorns get. To the point where, in the first millennium, the depictions of a unicorn, it looks like a goat with a jagged horn on its head. Yeah, it's not the most beautiful creature. Definitely not an elegant horse with a horn. And even if you look at unicorns now, you will notice that it is not really a horse with a horn on it. Notice cloven hooves, right? Notice all of this extra fetlock feathering. Notice a goat-like mustache, or what do we call it? Goatee. A goatee, right? So yeah,
because they were goats.
Unicorns in medieval mythology, in the medieval world, were often used as symbols of purity, and often used as an allegory of Christ, especially in the Hunt of the Unicorn, that famous set of tapestries that's in the cloisters in Yonkers, New York, right? Christ, the unicorn, in that is a metaphor, an allegory for the passion of the Christ. The whole thing, the Hunt of the Unicorn, it's the passion of the Christ. And so that the unicorn is a symbol of Christ. And if you notice in the unicorn in captivity, his chest is pierced and there's blood trickling down it, right? Just like Christ on the cross. So, the unicorn was a symbol of purity, and it was the basic idea was that the unicorn's horn, if you could get one, and some people did in the form of narwhal horns, that they could be ground up and be very medicinal for healing all manner of illnesses, for healing people from poisoning, from removing poisoning from liquids. So that's why a lot of noblemen, members of the nobility, especially ones who operated at the upper echelons of society and whose lives were often in danger from assassins, they wanted a unicorn horn so that they could actually dip it in their wine and guarantee that the wine was therefore no longer poisoned. We're not poisoned, right? Too bad that that's not true at all, because the horns in questions were narwhal horns, not really unicorn horns. But yeah, the idea, there was also this idea that unicorns, being creatures of purity and innocence, would be attracted to a virgin, which is why you nearly always see them. There's lots of depictions of, virgins with a unicorn in their lap. And of course, there's all kinds of naughtiness that could be implied in that scene as well. Okay, Handsome, could you? Oh no, I'll just reach over here and grab them. Or I won't. I don't know where my shears are. I thought you put them back. You put them in the other one instead of your nice hard one.
I didn't know where it was.
Oh, it was there on the table. So my snips were confiscated.
Ironically, a priest once told me unicorns have a phallic connotation.
I mean, like I said, it's complicated. As with many things in the medieval world, it's complicated. And of course, what the idea of unicorns now is not necessarily anything to do with what medieval people thought about unicorns. Right? They definitely didn't view them as a horse with a horn on its head. And there's the idea of the unicorn being attracted to a virgin. I mean, there could be some implications there. I will not deny that as a very real possibility. We do know that Marco Polo claims to have seen a unicorn in his Book of Wonders. He claims he saw one in Sumatra. And a lot of people have dismissed that as that account, and also used it to invalidate his work as being representative of actual travels. But as my condottiero pointed out, if you saw a rhinoceros as a medieval person, late 13th century person seeing a rhinoceros for the first time, you might think that's a unicorn. It has a horn on its head, especially depending on the kind of rhinoceros, right? The specific breed of rhinoceros. So yeah, maybe he did, but maybe he did go to Sumatra. Maybe he did see one of those pygmy rhinoceroses that I think lived in that part of the world, past tense, in that part of the world. And he thought, well, there's a unicorn. I've finally seen a unicorn. So yeah, that's what we know about unicorns that's what I know about unicorns in medieval mythology and the medieval world. To many people, unicorns were a real creature. They are depicted in bestiaries that depict creatures people believed existed. Right? Now, did everyone believe that? No, of course not. Just like today, not everyone believes in a sky god, for instance. Yeah. Let me see. Yeah. Are rhinos cloven hoofed? They are not, as far as I know. Wait, are they? No, wait. Do rhinos have cloven feet? Do they have hooves?
They have pads.
They have pads, right? Right. They're kind of padded, right? Now that you've asked, now I am in fact envisioning a rhinoceros with cloven hoof. But no, I know no. They've got like feet kind of things, right? Like elephants. Yeah, they're kind of like elephants, right?
They have their own foot
category
page. Then you can.
There's a whole page on rhinoceros feet. That's fun. Yep. What would you like 4 weeks touring in the chateau in the Loire Valley? For 4 weeks at Versailles? Oh God, 4 weeks at Versailles? No, way too much time at Versailles.
Javan Rhino is still around.
The Java rhino was still around?
Is still around.
Is still around. Oh, okay.
I thought it was extinct.
I thought it was extinct too. I just kind of assumed. I assume that pretty much any animal's extinct at this point. You know what I mean? That's just how cynical I am about what we've done to this planet and the biodiversity thereof. Yeah, would I like 4 weeks touring the Loire Valley? Yeah, I could totally spend 2 weeks touring the Loire Valley. 4 weeks in Versailles? Nah, Versailles is like a day, really. Seriously. First off, there's just not much left at Versailles. And you can only see a limited part of it. The grounds are pretty impressive, but no, Versailles is really it's not my bag, baby.
Jeez.
I prefer, now if you want to see, there are a number of Versailles copies from the end of the 17th century, because basically once Louis XIV built Versailles, every other prince and king wanted their own version, right? So my recommendation is skip Versailles and go to the archbishop's residence in Würzburg. That is an amazing building, and it has furnishings. Unlike Versailles, it's still fully furnished because revolutionaries didn't, go and have their way with it at the end of the 18th century. So yeah, I definitely recommend the Archiepiscopal Palace in Würzburg over Residenz, as they call it, over Versailles. Also, the Archiepiscopal Palace is basically in downtown Würzburg. It is in downtown Würzburg now. When it was built, it was kind of just outside the city, but now it's in the city. But then you can also go and explore medieval Würzburg and go and see the Marienburg, the big 17th century fortress on the top of the hill.
Say hi to Music for Earthworm's daughter.
Music for Earthworm's daughter? Oh, yeah.
Said hi.
Welcome. Thank you for joining. As under Music for Earthworms or with Music for Earthworms? Under. Okay. Fantastic. Welcome.
Saying that rhinos have 3-toed feet.
Yeah, rhinos. We have now discovered that rhinos have 3-toed feet.
They are not pretty.
They are not pretty. It is not a thing anyone should desire or crave. Rhinos are kosher if prepared correctly. Okay. I mean, I guess there's a lot of interesting creatures that could be considered kosher if prepared correctly. Goodness knows there's a lot of animals under the sun that weren't envisaged in the Old Testament world. For example, the platypus. Our platypus is kosher if prepared correctly. Actually, I think they're poisonous, aren't they? Well, their bite is, they're venomous and their flesh is poisonous. They're venomous and poisonous?
I'd have to double check. And they're fluorescent.
And platypi are the strangest creatures in the world. They really are.
Hofburg Palace with a Spanish writing school. Yeah.
Hofburg is pretty nice too. Yeah, I agree. I've actually been to Slovenia, where the breeding stables for the Lipizzaner are. I've been there, and that is a really wonderful experience. You can actually go and do riding camps there. You can take dressage lessons there. You can learn proper old school, basically medieval style equitation. If you really get down to it, that's what dressage is a descendant of, is medieval war equitation. Believe it or not. Question, where can you get this costume? I made this. What I'm wearing, I patterned and sewed entirely myself, all by hand. And so I know there are some vendors who sell garments kind of like this. I think Historic Enterprises does. They're not I'm, by the way, not a channel sponsor. I'm just thinking of people I know who sell the 15th century style short sleeve kirtle and smocks and the kerchief. I could be hired to make it, but you probably couldn't afford me. It's not that you couldn't afford me. Most people wouldn't want to pay what my time and labor and expertise would be worth. That's the sad reality, is that, most of these garments that people are buying from a lot of vendors selling medieval clothes, the garments have been offshored, are made by contract laborers in places without labor standards. And I'm not saying that's true about historic enterprises. I'm just saying that's how you can usually get things at a relatively cheap price. Yeah, I would probably charge $300 or $400 just to make the kirtle, probably. Yeah, because there's going to be some handwork involved. Even if I machine sewed the long stitches, there's still the lacing holes would have to either be hand sewn or lacing rings hand sewed on, for instance. I haven't actually thought about it because I'm a little nervous about making clothes for clients who are not in my vicinity. For fittings and whatnot. I know I've lots of friends I know who've bought garments from skilled sewists in other places. And when they get them, there's all sorts of things that need to be adjusted to make it fit. And I mean, some real mess ups. And I've not had any personal good experience either with having things made but from a distance. I've also pretty much had to alter every single thing I've had custom made from a distance. Yeah. Let me see. Have you been to Avignon? And is there anything of the building stuff still to see there? I have not been to Avignon, but there is still some of the Papal Palace to see. I do know that for a fact. Some of the Papal Palace is still there. I just haven't been there myself. If you're looking for really excellent medieval spaces to visit, Cordoba. You want to go to Cordoba. You want to go to Granada and go to the Alhambra. I'm thinking, I don't know why Spain popped into my head first, probably because I was just in Spain for a couple of weeks. In Germany, you want to go to Burg Roneburg, actually, to get an idea of what a real medieval castle is like, because they just recently restored many of the rooms to their peak of their medieval state, 14th, 15th century. And the castle itself was more or less abandoned after abandoned is a strong word, but it was no longer the seat of a count after the 15th century. And so most of the spaces are still in their 14th and 15th century structure. So you can really see what an actual medieval castle looks like. Burg Roneburg, it's outside of Frankfurt am Main in Germany. In fact, if you go to the top of the tallest tower, you can actually see Frankfurt from the tower because the castle was built on the top of a volcanic spout. So it has a very commanding view of the valley. Michael Jackson tried to buy it, actually, when the Prince of Burgundian was in dire need of money because of a bad gambling habit back in the early aughts. And when he was told that he could not have his way with it, that it had to be maintained in a historical state, the sale fell through. Yeah. There are medieval markets there regularly at Roneburg, but unfortunately, the last time I attended one, it was a pretty plasticky, not very authentic experience. It had just become too commercial. Yeah. Charlemagne baths at Aachen. I have been to Aachen. I don't remember seeing I don't recall seeing anything about baths preserved from the time of Charlemagne in Aachen. However, the cathedral at Aachen is an absolute must visit. And if you can manage to do it on a holy high day, so like the Feast of the Virgin Mary or Christmas, any of these high holy days, and get the full mass experience, even if you're an atheist, it's worth it because you get the full bells and smells, you get the litany of the saints, you actually get something that's pretty close to a medieval mass experience. Yeah, can recommend even for non-believers. It's a total body immersive experience. And of course, the cathedral itself in Aachen is still very, very Romanesque. It has only been minorly updated in certain specific ways, but on the inside, you definitely get the feel of the Cathedral of Charlemagne. And of course, there's all kinds of, the treasury there has an amazing collection of items that you must see. Okay, what else have I missed? Let me just check. Sorry. It's so hard to sell handmade things anymore. Everyone thinks a hand-knitted blanket is worth the same as one from Walmart. They don't understand the time and energy it takes to make it. Yeah, Kaylee. And it's not just the time and energy that it takes to make it. It's the 10,000 plus hours that you've invested to reach the level of expertise whereby people would want to pay you to make them something, right? Like they don't understand that you need to actually pay for that expertise as well. And that's the thing I have problems convincing people to actually remunerate me for, honestly. I get these private emails on a fairly regular basis asking in-depth questions that aren't just a quick one-off answer. And they want me to basically like provide consultation of a professional and expert level, but for free. And it's like, I'm not an academic. I don't have tenureship. And by which I mean, I don't have tenureship at a university whereby I'm just kind of paid to be knowledgeable and share my knowledge with people as a general matter of course, right? I only get paid if people literally pay me to in exchange for what it is I can teach them or share with them. So, some of these emails would take me hours to answer properly. And it's the lack of respect for knowledge as being something worth paying for is a little frustrating. But I think that's part of our malaise of the modern world in general, right? And the reality is that if this was a question that could have been answered properly by Google, then they wouldn't have sent me an email, right? Yeah. Let me see. So, rant off. Some of you may know, that I was a professional translator up until relatively recently, but companies no longer want to pay in boring European languages, right? Companies no longer want to pay pay decently or at all for translation work, especially not in European languages. They're just using their interns to do it cheaply, or ChatGPT, even worse. So, basically I was getting work where people wanted to pay me the same as an experienced, skilled translator as I was getting paid in 2005 as a baby translator. They wanted to pay me the same. No, just no. So then I switched to editing, and then ChatGPT and co ate the editing jobs. And so that brings me to medieval living history, crafting, cooking, hands-on experiences will hopefully be the last things taken by the machine. So hopefully people will want to pay me to teach them these things and will not want to just learn it from an AI video on YouTube, because of course now even the creator space is being eaten alive by AI, by crappy, garbage, incorrect, poorly produced, and still heavily pushed and heavily watched AI videos. And I can make a vow to you all. Any content that comes from me is from my own research, not AI, from primary sources. And I have edited it myself. I've scripted it myself. I have voiced it over myself, right? It will not be AI garbage.
How do you pronounce Alhambra?
Alhambra. Alhambra. The H is silent. It's more or less aspirated. Alhambra. Yeah, it's actually two words originally. Actually, it's from Arabic. Alhambra. But in the Spanish, apparently they can't handle the combination of the M, that plosive, and the R together. So they added a B just to make the sound, make it something you can pronounce in Spanish, right? So the Alhambra. Alhambra, not Alhambra. Alhambra. And it literally means the red thing because the stones used to make it are red, right? They have a red color to them. And the brick and the adobe, it has a red color to it. So yeah, I used to, I studied in Granada and at the Universidad de Granada, and I used to go up to the Alhambra every day, to the Palacio de Carlos V, and I would study and do my work there. I would do all my homework there in the Palacio because it was open, and I think it still is actually. You didn't have to pay to enter that part of it. And it was this magical, haunted space that is basically an edifice in tragedy and sorrow, because Charles V started building this ideal Renaissance palace in the Alhambra as his was going to be one of his new main seats of power. And he was using all of the latest and greatest in Renaissance architectural theory and aesthetics to build it. And then his queen died, and he loved his queen deeply. And he fell into such a depression that it was never finished. And that's why he eventually abdicated and his son Philip II took over. He didn't die. He abdicated. He quit. He quit being king, and he withdrew to the Escorial and lived out the rest of his life there, basically as a sad, depressed monk, more or less. Right? What?
Okay, so I was right. Sorry, I'm excited now. I can show everyone this. The correct pronunciation of Alhambra.
Yeah, Alhambra.
You live all year round? Well, I try not to die any part of the year.
What's the question?
No, well, she just said you live all year round.
I do. I'm not certain. I live all year round. I'm not certain what that what exactly that comment means.
Not in these clothes.
Oh.
You do wear them frequently.
I do wear these. I don't wear these clothes 24/7. Of course, I don't think anyone wears any clothes 24/7. If you do, stop. You need to change and put clean clothes on occasionally. But I do often wear this because I put it on. I wear these kinds of clothes often because I'm live. Every time I live stream, I try to put on medieval clothes for you all to create a nice ambiance, and also the algorithm really likes it. And then honestly, once I'm dressed. I'm not going to change again. So this is, yeah, I go outside all the time here in Daegu, South Korea, or wherever I am. And I just go and do my daily life this way. I can hike a mountain in this outfit, in this exact outfit that you see I have. I can go grocery shopping. I can go for long walks. I've even done a kickboxing workout in this exact outfit. Okay, not the collar. The collar would not stay on if I kickboxed. But yeah, so yeah, I have lots of experience wearing these clothes very, very often.
Susan says, Cauchy House is my favorite Art Nouveau building. Okay. Anne-François Polonini says, J'ai beaucoup vu été anglais. Je suis américain.
Hold on a minute. I'm gonna get to that. That French is scaring me.
No, I suck at French.
Let me see.
I like you very much. You are English?
Oh,
you have an American accent. No, you're American.
Oh yeah. Maybe Anne, est-ce que vous voulez dire tu m'aimes beaucoup? Non, je ne suis pas anglaise. Je suis américaine. Je le sais.
Who inspired you in the Middle Ages?
Who inspired me in the Middle Ages? Oh goodness. Actual historical people who have inspired me in the Middle Ages. Let me see. Eleanor of Aquitaine. Aliénor d'Aquitaine, Eleanor of Aquitaine, big inspiration for me. Basically, most any medieval woman who behaved badly, yeah, all the she-wolves of England, love them. Yeah, Aliénor of Aquitaine, very inspirational. Margaret of York, Christine de Pizan, very inspirational. Let me see. Who else? There are just so many inspirational individuals from the medieval period. But as a woman, I'm particularly, as a strong woman with opinions and of some level of erudition, I'm attracted to and inspired by women who have opinions and are of some level of erudition as well. Honestly, Queen Margaret, the Queen of Henry VI, she is highly inspirational, right? Because she is a French princess dumped into an English world that is increasingly English speaking. Her husband suffers from severe depression and or catatonia, right? And she manages to hold the throne and govern with him being an absolutely useless lump. And she wages battles to keep the power for her, but for her son, right? In an era when that was not common for English queens. And in a time when, England is increasingly, England and France are kind of increasingly becoming confrontational. Yeah, she's pretty inspirational. how her story ends is just really sad, honestly, for women who held so much power, wielded so much power, and did in fact accomplish so much against some of the greatest odds.
There's some French if you scroll back.
Let me see. Anne says she loves everything that relates to the Middle Ages. I'm writing some poems from that time. Oh, wonderful. And especially Alexandrin, which is a specific kind of sonnet form. Yeah, very cool. Très chouette, Anne. Let me see. They were drinking from a few too many lead cuts. I mean, yeah, lead was certainly a problem. Although the only people who would be drinking from lead cups would be people who drank from pewter, because otherwise, you know, cups were either glass or ceramic. And of course, the upper class maybe sometimes had chalices of gold or silver that probably didn't have lead in it. But yeah, there was certainly a lot of lead consumption in the Middle Ages. Also, by the way, people would often put sprinkle lead shavings into their wine, or lead powder into their wine, not shavings, lead powder into their wine. And I think sometimes there's recommendation to actually just put shaved lead in the wine because it sweetens it. Lead, in case you're wondering, is sweet, which might be part of the reason that children were licking lead paint back when it was used in the bad old days. But the reality is, Anne, merci beaucoup. Je m'en lasse. You all have to realize that we are not so far superior to medieval society as you all might like to think. We might not be using lead in our paint or in many of our materials anymore, but for that we've introduced new materials that have been proving toxic and having issues for long-term longevity and have impeded our ability to thrive as a species. Also, we were using lead in almost everything up until the 1950s in many cases. So yeah, we're not that far removed from medieval material culture in many ways. And in some ways, medieval material culture was absolutely superior to the way we handle materials now. For instance, the medieval attitude towards consumption was a circular economy, which meant that nothing got wasted. Everything was used, everything was reused, and reused and reused and reused until it couldn't be used anymore. And then they usually found some kind of last-ditch use for it. So take fabric, for instance. If it's wool, they would make a gown like this, a kirtle such as this, and then when it got too worn out, when it worn out, it would be repaired. When it got too worn out in places to be repaired, it would be cut down into a smaller garment to fit a smaller person. And then when the pieces could no longer even really be repaired for that smaller person, they would turn them into pouches. And then when if those pouches got too worn out, then they would take the remaining scraps of wool from these garments, the rags of wool, and they would use it to, for instance, stuff a mattress or insulate the walls. So there's a lot we could learn from medieval practices. Contrary to popular belief, we are not the pinnacle of civilization necessarily. Yeah, Anne, bienvenue, bienvenue. Welcome to my community. Qui joue? Mon mari joue. Il joue comment s'appelle cet instrument français? La lute. He's playing the lute. Yep, it's my husband practicing in the background. We do this thing together. We're doing this thing together. Yeah.
Here, I'll try and play something that I can actually play.
Petit Rien?
Fine.
You can play Petit Rien. You play it really well.
This one?
Yeah.
Now you said I can do it. Now I can't.
You can't do it. You're terrible. Does that make you feel better? Here, husband, bring the instrument here so we can show it. It's definitely not I'm pretty sure it's not. Je ne crois pas que cet instrument s'appelle sitar en français. Lute in English, L-U-T-E. Right.
Well, I've been crouched
la
over
lutte.
it for too long.
Tout à fait. Tout à fait.
Mother Teresa, it's so nice to see you. Yeah, definitely not Mother Teresa. Way too much collarbone and neckline showing for Mother Teresa. I am actually dressed as a medieval noblewoman, Franco-Burgundian, who is in her private quarters with her companions, engaging in some pleasant acts of sewing. So I'm wearing the 15th century equivalent of Lululemon with some bling.
Do you want to show me the other things?
Oh, thank you, Anne. That's a lovely compliment. She says, my grandfather was a notary who painted. You would be fine in a portrait. Oh, thank you, Anne. Appreciate that compliment. That's really kind of you. With a splash of mercury. Yeah, mercury. Oof, mercury. Mercury was used medicinally in the Middle Ages for a variety of complaints, because of course medieval medical theory involved balancing the humors, and mercury was definitely could have some humor about it. Unfortunately, for you menfolk, it was also used to treat syphilis, and there was a special syringe that that was used to apply the mercury in the specific place where the syphilis was attacking, shall we say. So yeah, mercury, of course, is one of these mystical substances because it behaves in such a strange way that pretty much everywhere, every human who's ever encountered mercury decides it has to be in some way tied to the gods.
Because it's cool.
Because it's cool, and it acts in such strange and enigmatic ways that it must be magical.
Shellback Bow's here. Hi.
Shellback bean? Shellback bean?
Bow.
Bow? Is it bow, not bean? I thought it was
not bean.
Damn it.
B-A-U.
Damn it. Okay. My family's motto, strength at the service of right. Of what? Is a lion who holds a balance of scales with something above. Azure and gold, the coat of arms. Oh, and that sounds lovely. Yeah. Dieu est mon droit. The motto of the English royal family since the Middle Ages is Dieu est mon droit, God and my right. My right to rule. Oh, shellback bow. I'm so sorry. Yep. No, I've been calling you shellback bean and you never corrected me. You're so kind. Shellback bow. I will correct that going forward. How are things over in Japan today? It is a beautiful day here in South Korea. Tomorrow it's going to be it's going to be more beautiful. Want to tell you all exciting news. Tomorrow I'm going to Gyeongju. It is an amazing, beautiful historical city here in Korea. We will be live streaming from Gyeongju. I'm going to live stream a sewing party from there, or a crafting party, probably Fingerloop braiding. And we will, of course, be doing a live stream tour around. And we'll be going to the Gyeongju National Museum, and I will be live streaming from there because they have the 6 gold crowns of Sheila reunited for the first time since the Japanese colonized Korea. They have them all at the museum. They're on special exhibit. So we're going to go take a look. I'm going to share the experience with you. We're going to go look at these amazing Sheila era crowns. These are the gold ones, because there are many that have been unearthed that were bronze or copper based and then they were gilt. No. These are gold, my friends. Really nice gold. So we're going to be live streaming, doing a bunch of different live streaming tomorrow. The travel stuff, we'll be doing some travel live streaming too from Gyeongju. So that will be on my Travels with the Creative Contessa channel if you're interested in following the travel stuff. So we'll probably be live streaming. We'll get a nice meal there and we'll live stream the meal so you can see, some Korean food in a traditional Korean space. Yeah. So yeah, tomorrow will be Gyeongju. Will be the Contessa hits the road kind of thing. J'adore sucré, je n'en ai jamais vu de tel. Bonne fête, nous ferons aussi Thanksgiving here. And this collar. So Anne says she loves this collar. She's never seen anything like it. So this is a collar worn by Maria Portinari in 2 different portraits. Her portrait when she was Maria Baroncelli by Hans Memling. And then later on in the altarpiece that her husband commissioned, probably she did as well, by Hugo van der Goes, that is in the Uffizi. So this is a replica of an original owned by Maria Portinari was a lady in waiting to Margaret of York, Duchess of Burgundy, and it's likely this was possibly maybe in some way related to Tommaso Portinari's connections to the Burgundian court, because he was one of the Duke's counselors. So yeah, this is a replica by Armor and Castings. By the way, if any of you would like to check out the Armor and Castings website, and you see any of the amazing, like they do lots of beautiful things, not just stunning colors. For instance, this ring is by Armor and Castings. It's a replica of an original 15th century ring. And if you use the code Contessa10, it will get you an extra 10% off of their goods. And I will be, full disclosure, they are one of my channel sponsors, but they're my channel sponsor because I believe in their goods, and I have purchased many of their goods with my own money, not just from sponsorship deals. Yep. Yep. That's another of their replica pieces from Margaret of York's hood. One of Margaret of York's beautiful nouches, or nooches as they were called in 15th century English. This is a replica of Bianca, or Isabella d'Este's jewel. Sorry, Beatrice d'Este's jewel, not Isabella. Beatrice d'Este's jewel, from several portraits of her, in fact. So yeah, if you go to armorandcastings.com, Contessa 10 gets you an extra 10% off. Yeah.
Oh, readings from Mexico.
Hola, ¿qué tal?
Ooh, evidently Anne also composes music. Neat. I'm a way beginner on the music front.
Shellback bow. Yeah, I'll be honest. I didn't like wearing jewelry until I discovered replica medieval jewelry, and then suddenly I got really interested. Yes, I know Scotland, and I know some things about medieval Scotland, actually. Martín, bienvenido. Hola, ¿qué tal? Yeah, and what kind of music do you compose? What's your preferred style? Oh, Trinidad and Tobago. Wow, we've got quite a fantastic diversity of people here. We did not get to either Trinidad or Tobago on our last trip to the Caribbean, did we? Our only ever trip to the Caribbean. Yeah, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Where we went now, I can't remember.
Is anyone else working on any projects today? Medieval Scotland is interesting because there are a lot of terrible myths about medieval Scotland and about the clothing worn in medieval Scotland. And the first thing I'm going to tell you about medieval Scotland is that kilts were never worn. They didn't exist. Whether in the Highlands or the Lowlands, it doesn't matter. Kilts didn't exist. Kilts are actually an invention of the 17th century, or a development of the 17th century.
Mary sent you a gift.
Oh, Mary, thank you. Very generous of you. Martín, estudié en Granada, por eso. I am a world traveler, and I am always expanding my list of places I've seen. So you know what? I may just come and visit you in Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah. Kilts are fun to wear, but so I tell people, if you want to do a historical pre-modern reenactment and you want to wear a kilt, Assyrian is a really good choice. Ancient Assyrian. So is ancient Egyptian. Those are all peoples that wore kilts. But the Scottish kilt basically is a development of wearing a giant blanket called a plaid that people in Scotland started wearing as the 16th century wears on, because it's getting colder as the Little Ice Age develops and gets colder and colder. And by the end of the 16th century, these blankets, these plaids, are so big and bulky that some man gets the bright idea that he can belt it. But it's still not a kilt yet, right? It's still literally just a giant rectangle with a belt around it. It's not until the second half of the 16th century that we see the first kilt that people would recognize as such. And the reason it's called a kilt is actually a medieval English word that comes from Scandinavian, that comes from Norwegian. And it literally means to truss up. And that's because what the person was doing, what the men were doing, is they were belting, putting the blanket on, belting it around their waist, and then they were pulling it up through the belt so it would drape over the belt so it would stay on their bodies and stay belted. They were kilting the plaid. So a kilt is actually not a synonym for a skirt. Actually, etymologically speaking, it's one of those backwards, those reverse meanings where the word kilt used to just mean to, and it's Middle English, 14th century English, all the way up until the end of the 16th century. Every time you see the word kilt, it has to do with pulling a garment up through your belt, right? And then eventually the so-called little kilt develops, the minor kilt, not the great kilt. And then historians in the 19th century, looking at Assyrian and Egyptian clothing, use the word kilt to apply to the garments that were worn by ancient Egyptians and ancient Assyrians. Yeah, but it all comes from English. Yeah. Shellback Bow, you watched my conversation with Philip from Irish Medieval History. Shout out for you if you're out there. Yeah, I'm anti-trousers. No, absolutely. You know what? And that's one of the wonderful things about medieval European clothing for men, for most of the era, is that, men are wearing, most of the Middle Ages in Western Europe, they're wearing some kind of, well, it's a dress, really. It's a tunic, right? We call it a tunic, but really modern men look at it and say, well, that's a dress. Well, yeah, but it's awesome. I particularly think it's really smashing when a man is wearing a tunic or a gown, as they're called in the 15th century, that goes all the way to the ground. It creates such a stunning look. Yeah. Yeah, so that's one of the nice things about medieval fashion for most of medieval European history in the West, is men are wearing some kind of skirted tunic thing that has really nice flow to it. Yeah, not boring like modern men's clothing. Blah. Modern men's clothing is generally just sad. And you know how you can tell that modern Western men's clothing is sad? Because if a man puts on a suit and he gets zapped back to 1900, no one is really going to look askance at him. They might wonder about the specific cut of his lapel or the number of buttons. But in essence, the suit has petrified since the second half of the 19th century. That's how you know fashion has gotten sad. Yeah. Well, the thing is that what we now define as being masculine, the comment is they were doing trans way before we were. I mean, the reality is that, and I know you're being tongue in cheek, and that's cool. But the reality is that what we now consider to be masculine has only recently become the definition of masculine. Romans mostly didn't wear any kind of, in Rome, especially ancient Romans, they were wearing tunics with not necessarily anything on underneath, right? So
has to go to sleep.
So yeah, who has to go to sleep? Oh, and merci beaucoup. I hope to see you again soon. Welcome to my community. Don't forget to subscribe.
And what number languages do you speak now?
Fluently, I speak 5 languages fluently. Spanish, French, German, English, and Italian. But I will tell you that many of my languages have gotten rusty because I don't get to use them very often here in Korea, right? So about a day or two of being in the country where that language is spoken, and it comes right back. But pretty much all of my languages are rusty. Oh, and I speak Korean like a 4-year-old, if that counts. Yeah.
Where are you from?
We are both American originally, but that doesn't necessarily, where are you from is not necessarily the question you're asking. I was born and raised in Delaware. I am one of the few Delawareans you may ever see on YouTube. And if you meet me in person, I may be the only Delawarean you ever meet. It's a small state on the center of the East Coast of the United States. The first state, actually, and one of the original 13 colonies. My condottiero, the lutenist in the background, he was actually born in the United Kingdom, in Banbury. But he was a military brat, and so he spent his whole childhood moving everywhere. And then he joined the U.S. military and moved everywhere. So where are you from can be a complicated question. I have not lived very much in the U.S. in the last 25 years. I haven't spent very much time in the U.S., honestly. Yeah, most of it's been living abroad, and that's the way I like it. Sorry, I'm just trying to actually bury the needle on this project I'm working on. Whenever I end a line of stitching, I do a technique called burying the needle, where you literally take the needle with your thread and you run it back through the last bit of stitching that you did. And then you just pull the needle off, and then your thread is actually, the end of your thread is caught by the other stitches. Yeah, so Martin, I mean, as an American, European history is my history, or at least as an American with skin this white. European history is my history. But yeah, I studied abroad in Europe. I lived in Germany and worked in Germany for 12 years. So yeah, I have a lot of knowledge, but I'm kind of curious about the whole world. So I have a lot of esoteric knowledge in a wide range of places and histories and cultures. Yeah, I read a lot. I definitely read a lot. I'm constantly refreshing my knowledge. I'm always looking at the latest papers that come out, the latest books that are published. I try not to rest on my laurels, as it were, and some of you will get that reference. Because I believe that knowledge is a journey and not a destination, and that our understanding of our world and the past and the present and the future is constantly evolving. And so I need to keep learning, right? Always learning is my motto. That's why I don't understand about this theory, this idea that's presented in certain works of fiction, the ennui of immortality. I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all. You have to be a very incurious immortal to actually ever get bored, because there's so many different cultures and histories to explore and learn about, and so many places to see, that I don't even think in a 1,000 years of lifetimes could you possibly explore it all. And by the time you've explored it all, it's all changed. So you can go explore it all again and see how it's different. Yeah. The Spartans. So the Spartans, the sexuality of the Spartans is very complicated. Spartan society was literally engineered, and I mean that, like, overnight it was engineered to be the way most people, when people think of Spartan society, right? Men and women lived separate lives. The men were supposed to be, and this is only the warrior caste, by the way. There were more than warriors in Sparta. They also actually had merchants and craftsmen. But when everyone thinks about Spartan society, they're only thinking really about the elites, the warrior caste, right? And so the warriors of Sparta, of course, were taken from their mothers when they were born. Once they were weaned, and not born, that's too strong. Once they were weaned, they were taken from their mothers as toddlers and sent to go live basically in a military camp with a bunch of other men. And they were raised basically completely separate from men. And to the point where when they eventually had to get married in order to actually procreate, because Sparta recognized the value of procreation for its society, sometimes they actually were afraid of the women because they had interacted with women so infrequently. But that wasn't all of Spartan society, and that wasn't every case. But what that meant for the women in Spartan society was a positive, because it meant they were the ones who had to manage the household. They were the ones who had to do business. They were the ones who had to do all the work of daily life, mind you, with slaves, because the men were focusing on their military training. And so that meant that Spartan women were strong, were independent, were respected. So it's a double-edged sword there. For women, Spartan society was where you wanted to live, actually, honestly. Yeah. What is that on your finger, fair maiden? Yeah. So for those who haven't heard, this is a splint to keep me from bending the finger, because I have stitches right over the top joint from a biopsy I had testing for fungus and bacterial infections. So this is to keep me from ripping my stitches out, which I did the first night after the biopsy, because I didn't have the splint, and I just kept bending my finger in my sleep, and I woke up and there was blood. So yeah. This may be unrelated. When you get the chance, can you share your facial skincare routine? Your skin looks lovely. Oh, Elka, thank you. That's very kind. I do devote a lot of time and attention to my skin. I will.
Oh, I forgot. You get comments from other places.
Yeah, I do.
That I don't get to see.
I do. I actually follow what is in some ways a medieval skincare routine, because medieval people were extremely clean, and they devoted a lot of attention to their hygiene, contrary to popular belief. I use a lot of my skincare products are as natural as reasonably can be, to the point of some of them are edible. So that's step one. I try to avoid as many synthetic chemicals as possible. I wash and I moisturize with really, really rich, natural, emollient rich. That's what I'm like, emollient rich creams. I use, and I rotate through a variety of skin creams in order to take advantage of as many different active ingredients as possible. And I apply twice a day, right? I have my morning applications and I have my evening applications. I also have an LED mask.
Bye, Martin.
So yeah.
Adiós, Martín. Ojalá que nos vemos. Hasta luego, ojalá. Yeah. So that's part of my skincare is regular cleansing with cream cleansers instead of I avoid soap on my skin. I avoid soap that actually has saponifit that strips the oil from my skin. There, I use cream cleansers. I do a lot of masks using creams that are rich in natural oils. Again, see edible. And I avoid the sun with a passion. And I use mineral sun blockers every single day, every day. If I leave the house, a mineral titanium dioxide or ideally zinc oxide goes on my skin.
At night, even when it's
okay, maybe not
outside,
at night. Right, not at night.
Only going to be on a train.
Yeah, even if I'm only going to be on a train, sunblock every day, and I use a parasol and I wear a sun hat. So I will say in large part, it's been because for a large part of my life, I have avoided sun damage on purpose and intentional. Yeah. So yeah, wash my skin once a day with a cream cleanser, use a variety of, vitamin A, vitamin C, lactic acid, really rich salves and creams that have like duck fat and beeswax in them. Yeah, it's been a variety of things, but I would say in large part, it's regularly moisturizing with moisturizers made of natural, mostly edible ingredients, plus avoiding the sun. Very important. Very, very important. And no, I'm not wearing any makeup. This is me au naturel. I almost never wear cosmetics. I just don't have the patience to learn how to do it well. It doesn't bring me joy to apply cosmetics. And so generally I just go without. I don't even have base foundation on today. Oh goodness. Let me see. Synthetic D usually comes from sheep's wool. Yeah, so you're talking about lanolin, right? Lanolin is actually very good for your skin, in fact. And I do have some lanolin cream that I have occasionally used on my skin. It's very good for handling eczema and patches of really dry skin. No, so yeah, sheep's wool is lanolin. Tallow is rendered cow fat, is rendered beef fat. And I do have multiple creams that actually have tallow in them. And there's a really good sunblock mineral blocker called Marshmallow. What was it called? The one that smells like marshmallow because it's got vanilla in it. It looks like marshmallow fluff. Yeah, it was in that jar. And it actually has nothing but beef tallow and zinc oxide and sunflower oil and vitamin E in it and vanilla, real vanilla bean actually. And it smells so delicious and it goes on so beautifully and it's so lovely and wonderfully moisturizing.
My fingers are starting to actually hurt.
Yeah, so to get vitamin D, I actually take a whole food calcium supplement where the vitamin D comes from is cultured specifically from some probiotic bacteria. And I think also from a specific form of kelp. Yeah. So yeah, my calcium and D levels are pretty good. The last time I had them tested, I passed that test with flying colors.
So no more loot. All right. My fingertips actually.
Amish, yeah.
Are you Amish? Ooh, what a new
Are you
interesting
Amish?
question.
Okay, here's my daily "Are you Amish?" question. happens quite frequently. No. Why? Yeah, one, I probably wouldn't be live streaming as was just observed. Two, they definitely don't dress like this. For one, this jewelry is way too not modest. It's way too immodest for the Amish, whose focus is on modesty and simplicity. And speaking of not modest, this neckline, all of this collarbone, all of this, my goodness, completely immodest. Off the shoulder girdle, nope, not modest, not Amish. What you see me in here is 15th century Franco-Burgundian, basically. So France Burgundy in the 15th century. I am dressed in the Lululemon of the 15th century, just my kirtle smock with a kerchief for casualness and bling to bling it up a little bit to bring it up to more of a noble status. Do I know if lanolin helps with psoriasis? I'm looking for a natural alternative for my steroid cream. It's awful for your skin. Yeah, steroid cream is problematic. Lanolin, I know that some people have successfully used lanolin on their psoriasis. Psoriasis, though, the problem is that that's usually an internal job, right? So this is the problem. This is my understanding of psoriasis, is that it actually comes from internal issues. So autoimmune or a hormonal imbalance. And that is what leads, or a reaction to foodstuffs, or a reaction to your environment. So it's again, it's an autoimmune response. So, applying steroids to it is like, it's treating the symptoms, but it's not treating the cause. So Kaylee, do you know what causes your psoriasis? Have you done an elimination diet to weed out all of the main allergens that tend to lead to inflammation and issues, autoimmune issues? I'm talking about the big five: potatoes, tomatoes, corn, or anything in the nightshade family, which is going to be like eggplant and zucchini and potatoes and tomatoes, corn syrup, refined sugar, wheat, and any grains that contain gluten, right? So lanolin can help. It will help relieve it for certain. But I think you might want to think about, or dairy is another big one that can cause an immune response that results in psoriasis. Yeah, you might want to consider an elimination diet if you haven't done one. But if you've done one, then forgive me for telling you what you already know. Yeah, I wear a veil on my head and also get asked if I'm Amish occasionally. Yeah, it's really funny because the Amish women, they wear a bonnet coif-like thing, right? But their dresses are so modest and so plain, to be kind about it, right? And have necklines like up to their neck with buttons, or with very, very simple garments, right? Like there was a time, I'm not certain if this is still true, but there was a time in Amish society where buttons were considered too fancy. Yeah.
It's the devil's connection.
Question: How is it that necklace put on isn't accurate? Yes, this is a replica, so it is a very accurate replica of an original that was owned by Maria Portinari, and it has a clasp. Henson, could you help me find the clasp? I can't. It has a clasp, and I'll show you the clasp. And the clasp is very authentic as far as the little bits of medieval jewelry that have survived.
This on yourself, didn't you?
I did. Yeah. Okay. Could you show the clasp, please?
So, I can't actually see your screen to see if I'm in the right spot.
You're in the right spot.
Ooh, yeah, look at that.
Yeah. So, and then it just goes on like this and hooks in. And it is as accurate a replica as we can make, given that this exact one didn't survive. This is based on one depicted in 2 portraits of Maria Portinari. Armor and Castings made this replica. They also make a collar that belonged to Queen Michelle of France. And you can buy it on their website, armorandcastings.com. Contessa 10 will get you an extra 10% off. The code Contessa 10 will get you an extra 10% off of anything you purchase on their website. And it's very accurate. And you can actually see on their website, I think they've posted, or on their, if you go to their Instagram, they've actually posted, or is their Facebook page, Armor and Castings, they've actually posted footage of making some of these pieces. And it is involved. To make this is not as easy as just pouring metal in a mold and out comes this thing. No, no, no. You have to cast each of these pieces separately. And then you have to enamel them, paint on the enamel, the colored bits, that's enamel over top of the gold, right? You have to paint on the enamel by hand separately and then fire it. And then you have to assemble set all the gems. Then you have to assemble all the pieces by hand. So it's not just it doesn't come out of a mold like this. It comes out of a mold in about 50 pieces or more. And then you have to clean them up, apply enamel, set the gems, attach everything together, right? Yeah. So this one, I think this one was $400. It might be, I think they've had to raise their prices, of course, because inflation in the US is pretty bad.
You definitely have to check the website.
Yeah, I think it's probably $500 or $600 at this point for this collar. And it's heavy. It weighs a pound. This is a serious piece of jewelry. It does not joke. But I do wear this with my modern evening gowns as well. You can go onto my Travels with the Creative Contessa page. I'm on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. I'm on everywhere. And there is a video of me wearing a gorgeous red evening gown with this collar, over the shoulder evening gown with this collar. It goes really well with modern formal attire as well.
And everybody loves it.
Yeah. James, exactly. You know, blacksmith, pottery, jewelry skills all combined just to make this piece. And of course, in the Middle Ages, the jeweler, the goldsmith wouldn't necessarily be the person who then did the enameling, right? So it's, this would have been a multi-stage, this probably would have been, represented 2 to 3 different professions making this piece ultimately. In fact, I don't know. I'm not certain if the evidence is that medieval jewelers, if medieval smiths did their own carvings, or if they outsourced the carving of their molds to an actual sculptor or actual carver. Now that I wouldn't surprise me if they did that, because embroiderers, for instance, didn't do the designs. No. This was made by an artist, a painter, and the painter did the design and then painted it onto the ground fabric. And then the tapestry weaver or embroiderer would go over and work over top of that design, the cartoon as it was called. But the embroiderers and the tapestry weavers didn't do the designs themselves, and they didn't put them on the fabric themselves either. That was the job of the artist that was hired to do the design. So it wouldn't surprise me if medieval goldsmiths, smiths in general, when they were doing cast items, if it was a carver who actually carved the molds for them. Yeah, interesting thought. Chimmy. I didn't clearly hear the maker of the necklace. A link, please. Armor, and are you putting a link in?
I can do that.
Armorandcastings.com. My condottiere will go ahead and pop the link in. And Contessa 10 will get you 10% off of anything you order from their website. Anything you order from their website. They are a channel sponsor, but it's because I believe in their products immensely. And I've spent lots of money on their products before they became a channel sponsor. So I have literally put my money where my mouth is, and still bought more, right? So yeah, I have literally put my money where my mouth is on that regard. Oh my gosh, Chimi. Okay. Do you want to get in my lap? He's upset because I'm in a small chair, so he can't get up and sit next to me. Come on, Chimi. You want to get in my lap? Do you want to get in my lap? Come on, baby. Come. You can do it. There's enough room for you. Come on. Oh, goodness. Okay. Sorry, everyone. Chimi, come here. Do you want me to put you in my lap? Okay, no, I guess not. Normally, I'm on a settee, and then he can get up on the settee and put his head in my lap, and he likes that. This is, in his mind, this is the time when that should normally happen. But apparently, my lap is just too small today. Let me see. Sean, I love when you talk about goldsmithing. Now, I really have to be honest. I know the bare minimum about medieval goldsmithing. I mean, I certainly know more than the average person that you would just encounter on any random street in the world. But yeah, I understand the process of goldsmithing. I understand the labor that is involved. I understand the craftsmanship. I understand the general processes, but I've never done it myself. Takeda, however, is a smith, and he probably has not necessarily a goldsmith, but he has lots of smithing experience. And if he's still out there, he can talk much more authoritatively than I can. There is the link for armorandcastings.com. That is where you can go and get a variety of jewelry.
Nope, he's too angry.
This is
There's a kitty.
this is the Chimi who wanted to get in my lap, but now you've picked him up and
I
he's
picked
not
him up
happy.
and now he's mad at
He's
me.
not happy with you, handsome. Actually, could you go grab my wide belt, the Burgundian belt?
Oh yeah.
Show you some of the other pieces we have from Armor and Castings. They have a wide variety of jewelry, of belt fittings from a huge array of eras, like ancient Roman all the way up to early 17th century. They do jewelry, they do belt fittings, they do practical pieces that anything that was, medieval and was cast out of metal, they are basically making it. And they've also, expanded to Eastern Europe. They've expanded into some Levant casting, I think. But don't quote me on that. But they have, they cover the Norse era heavily, the immigration period. And they've got some interesting pieces for a wide array of historical interpretations.
My amazing handiwork here.
I'm curious what kind of closure findings they had for necklaces in the 16th century. Today, we mostly see lobster clasps. I wonder what the medieval equivalent is. Yeah, so I'll answer that question in a moment. This is the belt I made, but the fittings are Armor and Castings. So this is the wide style belt that would be worn over the gown, this gown that I'm making now, actually. And yeah, this is Armor and Castings. Yeah. So yeah, beautiful stuff, right? So what kind of clasps they have? So mostly it seems to be, and I'm not, Laurie, you might actually have a term I don't have from modern parlance. The lobster clasp, is that the one I just showed where it's this? No. Okay. Then
it's the one where it's like this, and then you can.
Oh yeah, I've not seen any evidence of the lobster clasp myself, honestly. The problem is that not much jewelry survives intact from the Middle Ages because often it was melted down and the jewels were reset in a more modern setting, right? Because everyone wants stylish things. So eventually most of these collars like this ended up getting melted down and recycled into something else.
You can show your crown as well.
Which means that we don't necessarily have enough extant medieval necklaces, for instance, to actually get a real idea of what the clasps were. But the one on this, I think, is based off of the collar that belonged to Queen Michelle, one of the 15th century queens of France. And I'm pretty certain that hers, it's basically a rectangle, and there's a curved metal piece that just kind of slots through into it like this, basically like the one on here that we just shown. Otherwise, we don't know much because just not much has survived. Granted, I am not an expert on medieval jewelry. I know some things about it. I know about the pieces that I have in my collection. But I can't necessarily make broad sweeping statements. But in the books that I have on medieval jewelry, there's just so little has survived. But I've never seen the lobster clasp. I haven't seen any evidence of that in the actual medieval record. I'll look into it further, though, Laurie, and get back to you next time, because now I'm curious. Yeah, so in the old days, they would clip coins. That's why they invented the perforated edge around the coin. That is correct. Most people don't know that. The perforated edges that you see around coins, that's to prevent fraud. That's to prevent people from literally clipping metal away from the coin back when the coin itself was the currency, like the the value was in the metal in the coin itself, not what it stood for. It wasn't a fiat currency. It was a real currency. Yep, so that is absolutely true. That's why coins eventually, why someone, and I don't know who, was the first person to have the bright idea to put the perforated edges, the ridges around coins. But that is what it was intended to stop. Of course, it didn't stop people from casting their own coins that had less metal in them and then using those to get coins that had full metal in them. You know, people will always find a way around the rules. They will always find a way to cheat the system. They will always find a way to make money in the laziest way possible, right? It's just humans. Humans have literally evolved to be lazy from a time in our evolution when it was hard to make sure you always had enough calories to move around. That's my theory anyway, that laziness is actually a survival tool. Yeah, so even though I'm just whip stitching these two layers of fabric together, you can see it actually can take quite a bit of time to whip stitch. Of course, if you're not answering questions and talking at the same time, holding forth while you sew, you probably are less likely to take as much time as I've been taking.
Shellback Bow is so right on that. We technically actually don't have coins anymore. We have tokens.
Yeah, that's actually true. Shellback Bow, you're right. We don't really have coins anymore. We have tokens that represent something else. Yeah, good point. Valid point.
I must clean.
Okay.
And Jeannie's mad at me now.
Because you didn't give him treats? You should. You should. Oh, let's see. Another question. What other impressions have you done? I do 15th century Italian. So currently mostly 1480s Florentine. I started off in the 12th century, actually. I still am very fond of 12th century clothing, but I discovered that we know nothing about dance in the 12th century. And dance is a very important part of reenactment for me, of living history. So I moved up to the 15th century, which is the earliest era for which we actually have documentable dances. I have done ancient Greek impressions. I have done some Victorian stuff. I have done some 18th century stuff. I have done some 16th century, like 1560s Italian. I've also done some 1520s Italian. Let's see. I have explored 18th century Turkish clothing. I have been researching in depth medieval and early modern Korean clothing. So Korean clothing kind of up to and including the 18th century. And that's a big research project that I'm going to be taking on very shortly, is recreating clothing from the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries in Joseon, in Korea, as some of you may know it. And I'm going to be going to museums very shortly and actually looking at extant garments and doing a whole bunch of research, of examination rather, to explore the order of operations for these historical garments. Which layers go together first, what stitches are used for each of the layers, how they're put together, linings, interlinings, all of that. So my goal is to amass as much information as is actually available in order to remake these garments. And I'm collaborating with Dr. Minji Kim, who is a world-renowned expert on historical Korean garments. She and I are going to be co-authoring a paper. She's going to be able to bring to the table her in-depth knowledge of documentary evidence. And I'm going to bring to the table my knowledge of historical fashion, of remaking clothes, of hand sewing. And I think we're going to be able to put together a really interesting paper that I'm hoping is going to open up new doors for people outside of Korea, people who don't speak Korean, who want to recreate these amazing, beautiful garments from Korea's past. So yeah, that's an exciting new project. I'm going to there's an exhibit actually this Wednesday. There's an exhibit that ends this week, but I'm going to get there on Wednesday in the Hwasong Municipal City Museum that is about the extant garments of a 17th century officer, Joseon military officer. They excavated his grave because they were constructing something, and they have the original garments plus the reconstructed garments. It's a whole exhibit about this 17th century military clothing from Joseon, and I'm very excited to go to this exhibit and see what's what. Now, I will not be allowed to examine the garments that are on display there, but I will get to see garments I've never gotten to see outside of certain very restricted access papers. And if I'm lucky, I'll be able to live stream it. If I don't live stream, then I'll just film the whole tour through the museum, and I'll just publish it unedited. So you get to see the unedited Contessa. But I'm very excited about that exhibit. That's on Wednesday, Korea time, GMZ +9, which will be Tuesday evening for many of you, or afternoon or evening for many of you, or the middle of the night on Tuesday. Yeah, should be very exciting. Yeah, I doubt they had lots. Yeah. Living in a place like the UK, you definitely have a lot. If medieval European history is the thing, then living in the UK is definitely a great place to be. It really is. Yeah. As a medievalist, if you live in the United States, your options are much more limited to what you can do when you travel. Unless you happen to live in a place that had a robber baron. If you lived in a place that had a robber baron, then you also have a large medieval collection at your disposal, because the 19th century Gilded Age robber barons were very fond of medieval artifacts, and they bought thousands upon thousands of them and brought them to the United States. And then when they died, because they feared the fires of hell, rightfully so, they endowed museums with their medieval collections. So the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the cloisters, thank you, Rockefeller, thank you, Vanderbilt, right? Cleveland had robber barons, the Gettys were robber barons, the Walters were robber barons, right? So any place in the United States that had a large population of robber barons, they will have you go there, and I guarantee you're going to find museums with good medieval collections. In some cases, better medieval collections that you might be able to find in certain parts of Europe. So yeah, but that doesn't help with access to things like textiles, because the textiles that have been found have mostly been found since the Gilded Age, which means that, with the exception of some tapestries, actually thinking about the Hunt of the Unicorn, but that means that most of textiles that have been found are still in Europe. They weren't bought up by the 19th century robber barons and then donated to American museums. There are a lot of really good medieval leather goods, though, in a variety of American museums. The Met, both the cloisters and the main Metropolitan Museum of Art, both have excellent medieval leather collections. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, UK, absolutely. So UK history is my history, literally. I'm descended from Mayflower pilgrims, in quotes, and they are from England. So yeah, literally, UK history is my history. So is Italian history. So is German history. So is Hungarian history. So is Czech history. So is Irish history. Being the mutt American that I am, all of those places, their history is my history. And honestly, trying to tease out French history from Italian history from German history, it's a fool's errand, because those are artificial borders. It's not like people stayed in their land and never traveled, and those histories didn't interact. European history is one big panoply. It's one big tapestry. So yeah, UK history is absolutely my history. But the problem is that, many of the artifacts of daily life from the Middle Ages aren't in the United States, they're in Europe, is the point, actually. Oh goodness, I've gotten so far behind in the comments. Sorry. Oh goodness. I've gotten so far behind in the comments. Sorry, everyone, if you had a question and I didn't answer it, like an actual question about history, or you can even ask, things about where I've been and what I've seen and what I've done in my life. But if it was just a cheeky question, please But if you asked a question and I didn't get to it, please pop it in back into the comments. The Pilgrims, meaning the Pilgrims, the Puritan religious whack jobs who were basically encouraged to leave Europe and go set up the Boston colony in 1620, right? Those Puritans on the Mayflower, or those Pilgrims, the Pilgrims, who then set up Plymouth Plantation. Well, they actually made landfall in Cape Cod, but then Plymouth Plantation, and yeah, they're my ancestors. They're some of my ancestors. So I am a Mayflower descendant. Yep. I can go visit the historical interpreters who work at Plymouth Plantation and see who it is who depicts my great times 12 grandparents. Yeah. The Smithsonian, absolutely, Jamesy. Smithsonian, 100%. We all know the elite height artifacts deep in the mountains that only certain people can view to make them feel unique. I'm so elite that only we can gaze upon something no one can else. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a shame that most robber barons these days, this let me tell you, the latest class of robber barons suck. They have terrible taste. They throw their money away on garbage. I mean, penis-shaped rockets, really? They will leave no legacy that is worth looking at, unfortunately. So today's class of robber barons, for the most part, they just all suck. Yeah, we should eat the rich, honestly. That would be a better use for them than what it is they do for society now. Yeah, and these robber barons, they don't fear the fires of hell. So there will be no endowments of universities and museums and performance centers, right? That is not what today's robber barons will do. Yeah. Oh, Sadie, welcome back. Thank you for joining us again. There is evidence that the Vikings were, the Vikings were absolutely not evidence. It is fact that the Norse, not necessarily the Vikings, because Vikings are a job, they're raiders, but the Norse absolutely set up a settlement in Newfoundland. 100%. It's not even up for debate. They have excavated the settlement. They have found the evidence, the longhouses. They found all of the things that the Norse left behind. There was a Norse settlement in Greenland up until the 15th century, right? So 100% they were in Newfoundland. They just left. They did leave. And yeah, Columbus, the thing that's important about Columbus's trip, despite the fact that he was a psychotic megalomaniac, avaricious megalomaniac, the thing that's important about his journey is that it's his journey that really turned Europe's attention westward instead of eastward and unleashed the colonial era and basically allowed Europe to spread its wings across the entire planet, right? That is the important thing about Columbus's journey, because even though there was, people knew there was something, a lot of people knew there was something to the west. They just had no idea how much it was and what it was and the resources that were there. And so Columbus is the one who he's the one who said, the Portuguese are going east, let's go west. Right. Of course, it's also because he thought the Earth was apparently a pear shape and was much, much smaller than it actually was. So he really thought it would be faster to reach Indonesia and the Spice Islands going west than it was going east. Oh, how wrong he was. But that journey is crucial because it did change the course of civilization. Would someone else have eventually probably looked west? Maybe, but maybe not. Who knows?
Absolutely would have.
I mean, yes, Europe was getting really tight. They needed more land.
Not just that. Technology was advancing.
But yeah, I mean, the important thing about Columbus's journey isn't that he so-called discovered America. It's that his journeys turned the lens of the leaders of Europe westward. That's the important part. Whereas the Norse colonies didn't impact the rest of Europe, basically. No one in France cared about, the French king in the 10th century didn't care about the Newfoundland settlement. Because at that time there weren't really, for the most part, great nation states in Europe in the 10th century. right? There was a bunch of little kingdoms, and none of them really had the resources to fund a journey of discovery to the west. Whereas the Norse, who made their own way westward, were doing so for their own, were literally personally funded private enterprises, not state operated enterprises. Yeah, during harsh winters, it's easy to get people to kill you if you feed them. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see, what have I missed? What is the Columbus equivalent for Korea? When you say Columbus equivalent, do you mean, what do you mean? I need you to clarify, because Columbus is a lot of things, different things to different people. So are you talking about an explorer who set out and explored by sea? Or are you talking about a megalomaniac, psychotic leader who tortured his people in the name of law and order and his so-called faith?
Ooh, that's the prince who was put into the rice chest.
Yeah, so I need you to clarify, because there's no one person who's equivalent. And the Korea, Joseon,
they weren't big on the exploration.
they didn't do exploration. It's not something that people on the Korean Peninsula seem to do very much of. They had a naval fleet because they had to, because Japan kept invading by water. But the naval fleet was never used for exploration, and that's possibly because Korea basically had everything it needed here. And the population was small enough that there were no pressures to go further afield. So yeah, there is no explorer equivalent. The closest naval, they have some naval heroes especially in the Imjin War. That would be the famous and oh so interesting Admiral Yi, who is kind of a rags to riches to rags to riches to rags to riches story. But
seriously, one of the most fascinating.
Probably one of the most fascinating military leaders in the history of the world, and I'm not exaggerating. His trajectory is completely bonkers. Am I wrong?
No. Everyone's like, "Oh, you're doing a great job." Well, screw you. We're sending you to this.
Yeah, we're going to demote
terrible
you.
Place.
You made this higher-ranking actual nobleman look bad, so we're going to break you back to corporal and send you to this shitty hole in the wall. And then, yeah, Admiral Yi. I was thinking of the Columbian Exchange, but it's possible that it doesn't exist. Okay, the Columbian Exchange. Okay,
they do have that.
There, I can help you. That's the Silk Road. Yeah. Well, that's so. First off, the Silk Road is the first major exchange, and I'm talking 15, 16, 1700 years ago, ancient Rome, right?
No, I mean, for the Columbian Exchange, the Koreans actually got the pepper.
Well, I know, but we're talking, he's talking like in terms of that, the Korean version of that, which is not just the Columbian Exchange. The Korean version of that is the Silk Road, 100%. And we know that even in the 5th century, 6th century, items are being made, crafted, and made and crafted in Constantinople and transported all the way to Korea, glassware, no less, finely made, finely wrought glassware. And it's ending up in Korean royal tombs in the 5th and 6th century. And tomorrow, when I take you out to Gyeongju, I will show you such a tomb where such a piece of glass was found. And we know that beads are making their way up from Indonesia, and we know that
Byzantine daggers.
Western. They call it Western Asian, but what they really mean is Eastern European metal cast metal smithed items. God, why is language failing me? Metalwares like daggers and brooches and goblets, right, are making their way from Western Asia, which is what they call it on the maps, but it's actually Europe.
Which is great. I love that they call it Western Asia.
So it's actually the Silk Road is Korea's Columbian Exchange. But then the actual Columbian Exchange absolutely impacts Korea, because it's through the Columbian Exchange that Korea gets gochu, the red pepper. There are no gochu. There's some crazy fringe nationalist bullshit theories that, Asia developed its own pepper in parallel to the New World, but I've seen zero evidence of that. And that there's no evidence of that because none of the recipes from before Columbus or even before the 18th century contain peppers, right? Chili peppers. And so it is the Columbian Exchange that brings the chili pepper to Korea, but it doesn't get here until the 18th century. And even then, no one actually wants to use it except for poor people, because they discover that by adding chili pepper flakes to their kimchi, it preserves it for longer, and it retards microbial growth better, which they don't understand about the microbial growth part, but they know that the outcomes are better, right, with the chili pepper. So yeah, the Columbian Exchange definitely impacts Korean cuisine massively, even before the Americans completely trashed the cuisine here. But yeah, it's actually the Silk Road is the first Columbian Exchange in the sense of that, in the sense of a massive exchange of goods and culture even. Yeah, that's the Silk Road. Amazed at how I can hold on to so much information. I don't know. I have a beautiful mind, I guess, in quotes.
She makes me feel stupid all the time.
So honestly, it's things that interest me that I retain. If it doesn't interest me, I probably am less likely to retain it. So yeah. Yeah, kimchi, yeah. Shell Bean Bo says it correctly. Kimchi is Korean sauerkraut, right? Like every culture seems to figure out about fermenting stuff. And kimchi before gochu was, it was sauerkraut, right? It was just cabbage and water and there were some differences, like they would include fermented shrimp paste would be included in kimchi even before the gochu. But yeah. Everyone seems to at some point realize that it's a good idea to ferment vegetables.
Bye-bye, love.
Oh, where are you going?
It's almost 2.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go have fun at your game. Okay.
Incidentally, it's getting close to 2 as well.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Just so you know.
Am I doing something today? Is there something else I'm supposed to do today?
Dancing doesn't start till 7.
Oh.
So you got time.
Okay.
How's your battery doing?
Oh, the battery's actually okay because we're not on Wi-Fi. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. Why is tea not so prevalent in the US? It was at one point, wasn't it? Let's see. Good question. No. Tea is probably more prevalent in the US now than it has ever been. Okay, that's not true. Okay, it depends what you mean by prevalent. If you're talking about per capita, so it all goes back to the American Revolution, right? And so, yeah, before the American Revolution, we were a tea drinking peoples because Britain was a tea drinking peoples by the 18th century. Tea was a big part of our economy, but tea was recognized as being very British, and to support the tea industry was to support the British, who, apparently, a bunch of rich colonists were trying to break away from, so they didn't have to pay taxes. And we're using, the average Joe Schmo to fight their war for them. And eventually it was acknowledged that if we really wanted to put a dent in Britain's economy, in the hopes of helping secure our independence, we'd have to stop drinking tea and instead start drinking coffee. Right. So that's actually the break in the tea in tea consumption in the US is actually the 18th century, and it ties back to the American Revolution.
Did you see the super chat question for Music for Earthworms?
No, Music for Earthworms. I'm so sorry. I did not see it. What was the question?
I saw somebody.
Okay. Music for Earthworms. Thank you so much for supporting me. Music, you are just, oh my God. You haven't reached out to me yet about me getting you on the Discord server so you can get access to that extra stuff. Were jesters expendable fools or a highly regarded member of the King's Court? Do I know any funny tales of jesters, and can I recommend any books on jesters? Jesters, not jesters. Jesters. Jesters were highly valued members of the court. They were not considered expendable at all. And it is often in history where a jester is attributed with, accomplishing great things in the name of their sovereign. So for instance, apparently there is it's funny, I just heard this tale today. Now this is possibly apocryphal. Funny tales about jesters. William, Duke of Normandy, had a very turbulent childhood, and because his father died on crusade when he was 7. And the problem is that in 11th century Normandy, When you're a 7-year-old and you become the Duke of Normandy, everyone starts eyeing your spot, your throne, your ducal coronet as something they should hypothetically be able to easily take for themselves, right? So unfortunately, that kind of turbulence continued for William, not only through his childhood and adolescence, but even into his majority, when some of his fellow peers were still eyeing his position. And apparently, he was actually warned about an attack that was coming by, and this is apocryphal, by his fool. His fool warned him that there was a plot afoot against him, and it allowed him to escape in a timely fashion. I don't know the fool's name. I just heard this today, and so in my mind, it's still apocryphal because I haven't seen the primary source. But yeah, there's tales all throughout the Middle Ages of the fool, the jester, getting paid really well, getting provided with a very nice position in the household. Henry VIII comes to mind as well. Being, in some cases, being given a title of a minor gentry, being provided for in a very comfortable fashion, and having the king's ear. And often courtiers would indeed, and it is true, I've read this on multiple accounts, that courtiers would go to the fool, relay the bad news to the fool, or the distressing news to the fool, or the deleterious news to the fool, and the fool would recount it and tell the sovereign, and the fool would be fine. And also, the fool could absolutely get away with basically pointing out the sovereign's foibles. Any books, I can't think of any concentrated book, though. The thing is that I've read a lot of chronicles from a variety of sources, and primary source chronicles from chroniclers who were writing at the time. And I have read these accounts in these chronicles. So I honestly, I'm so sorry, Musique, I cannot think of any specific compendia that would compile, that would focus on the fool in history. I don't know anything offhand. Do any of you out there in the community, have you seen or read any books that focused on the role of the fool throughout human history? Because it's the role of the fool, that's not a medieval concept. That predates the Middle Ages. It's been around for a while. Interestingly, I am not aware in Korea, in Joseon, there is no fool, but I think that's because the king was, the role of kingship in Korea was just so different. Their relationship to the country, their relationship to their nobles, and because of Neo-Confucianism, there was no need to have a fool to intercede because the king knew to behave himself. James says, like a political comedian who blows smoke up His Highness's arse, so to speak. Yep. No, exactly. That is it. Basically, yeah. Fools, exactly. Fools were possibly the first political comedians, and the ones who could get away with that, right? Yeah, exactly. Not just in entertainment, but in intellectual. Yeah, fools were witty. They were witty. They were intelligent. They were clever. And there's actually a deck of cards preserved in the Cloisters Museum in New York, the Metropolitan Museum of Art Cloisters. And I have a replica of the set. Unfortunately, my aide has gone to go play D&D, so he can't go fetch the replica deck of cards that I have, but they're actually oval. They're oval shaped. And in the knaves, the face cards are apparently actual people from 15th century courts, Burgundy, France, England. And the fool, one of the knaves, is not a knave, but is a fool. So 3 of the knaves are knaves. They're actually squires, basically, like they have spears. But one of them is an actual fool. And it's said that that is actually the fool of Charles the Bold. That is actually a real man in his actual fool's costume. So yeah, we actually have portraits of fools. This is how important they were in society, in the court, that the kings actually had portraits painted of them. So yeah, fools were not dispensable at all. They were an essential piece of the medieval court in many different places in Europe. So, I often do avoid making grand sweeping statements about Europe and the Middle Ages, not a monolith, not a monolith, not a monolith. But in this case, the role of the fool seems to have been pretty fairly pan-European. And I mean, at least from the, I think I remember reading about a fool in Henry II's court, Henry II of England. So at least from the 12th century, to my knowledge, many courts had fools. And I guess I told you about that. That was William, Duke of Normandy. So that's 11th century. Yeah. Once you serve the crown, you can't walk away. You will serve. So you will serve, and you acknowledge the privilege and sacrifice. Yeah, absolutely. And I also actually read about this is I'm sorry I can't give you the specific details, but a memory was just triggered. I read once of a court fool being pensioned. He was allowed to retire, and he was provided with a pension in his old age, right? Until the day he died, he was cared for by the court. I mean, that's the kind, and that's the aspect of the medieval system, the pre-modern system, that a lot of people don't want to acknowledge, because they don't want to acknowledge that medieval society had some things better than we do. And one of those things is that if you served honorably, in other words, there was no disgrace attached to you and you didn't commit treason against your sovereign, if you served honorably, you would be allowed to retire once you became too old to do the work, and they would provide for you. They would provide a place for you to live. They would provide you with money so you could live. You would be provided with food and clothing for the rest of your life, right? This crops up in the expense accounts that I've read from a variety of different royals and even regnant dukes and counts, right? That these people are pensioned. They're not just abandoned. Completely different from now, where companies will discard people at will, right? What's your favorite medieval movie? Good question. My favorite medieval movie, there aren't many that I've liked, because they're all mostly garbage, right? So here's the problem with medieval movies. These days especially, they're filmed to be so dark, to make everyone look filthy and stinky and have raggedy clothes, and they're filmed through a blue filter, that horrible blue filter that casts this absolutely oppressive aspect over everything. So and of course, then you get to the clothing, and the clothing is almost invariably terrible. Lots of leather, lots of men in trousers, lots of women in evening gowns with glamour makeup and hairstyles like no one has ever worn before the 20th century. So there aren't many that I actually like. So let me think if I have a favorite medieval movie. Yeah, it's hard. I'll be honest, I generally avoid watching historical movies and shows, because the clothing is always so bad that it just distracts me and I can't actually watch the movie. And then sometimes the history is so badly abused. I can't think of any medieval movie offhand. The reality is that shows like Game of Thrones often come closer to authentic fantasy shows, like Game of Thrones often come closer to authentic medieval clothing and colors than so-called historical movies do. I can't think of anything offhand. I mean, there's been some BBC productions in the past that were, miniseries that were good. Oh, Blackadder. Blackadder is is one of my favorite medieval shows, medieval and Renaissance shows, because the clothing is pretty damned accurate. They're actually wearing colors, and they're actually set in medieval settings. Oh my God, isn't that terrible? Books. If you're talking about fiction, let's see. The Cadfile series. Oh, the Cadfile series is pretty decent. They're a little raggedy, but people are mostly in clothes. The Cadfile series is very good. And the Cadfile books are very good. I really do like the Cadfile books. So Cadfile, it's set in the 12th century after. It's about a man who was a crusader, and he comes back and becomes a monk to atone for the sins he committed in the Holy Land. And it's a monastery on the border between Wales and England, and it takes place during one of the first English civil wars, the civil war between Stephen and Matilda. And it's basically a murder mystery. Yeah, the Cadfile series. Love the Cadfile. Of course, Sir Derek Jacobi. Love the Cadfile series, very much so. very much. Maybe if you name movies you've seen and I can give you my opinion of it, might be better. Let me see. What was the difference in fashion between the elite and middle class during the medieval period, or did they follow the same fashion trends? The medieval and the, so that in general, the differences between the medieval and elite are going to be the silhouettes will be similar. The layers will be similar. As you go higher up in the spectrum, you're more likely to, the clothing will have more fabric in it. It will have longer trains. The sleeves will be bigger, right? Or more narrow, depending on which way the fashion is. The fabrics will be more, obviously more opulent. So at the lower end of the spectrum, but the layers will still be the same. It's still going to be a smock, which is this linen layer, an interim layer like this. This is called a kirtle in the 15th century, and then an overlayer. It's just a question of how fancy those layers are, how tightly tailored they are, how full they are, whether they have trains or not. But in general, you know, the silhouette will be similar, with the exception of the lower classes are less likely to have tightly fitted garments. They're more likely to have looser garments, especially because in the lower classes that actually have to work, they need to be able to move around in their clothing, and they need to have, you know, full flexibility to roll up their sleeves, to do dirty work and that kind of thing. But for the most part, the big differences between the lower classes and the upper classes, it's going to be the opulence of the fabrics, the opulence of the decoration, the amount of fabric in each layer of garment. That is what's really going to differ. And of course, you're not going to have serfs wandering around in silk. Also, the quality of the fabric. So, you know, everyone wore wool. Everyone wore wool. Everyone. Even kings and queens wore wool. But the wool that the kings and queens wear is going to be more like this beautiful silky broadcloth that I have here that literally shines, right? See that shine, right? Whereas the wool that, you know, serfs would have worn in the brief time where serfdom is a thing, it's not very long, by the way, serfs would have worn probably a homespun, heavier, thicker, itchier, actually. Yeah, so that's going to be the difference. It's going to be the opulence of the fabrics, the amount of fabric, and the opulence of decoration. That's mostly going to distinguish. Now, when you get to, and of course, in the upper end of the spectrum, you're going to have more elaborate hairstyles, more elaborate headdresses, because obviously your peasants aren't going to have someone to coif their hair beautifully every day, right? So those, but in general, it's going to come down to, you know, the layers are the same. It's just the fit and the ornamentation and the fabrics that will differ, but it will be more or less the same kind of shape. It's not going to be drastically different. As you get later in the Middle Ages, it does start getting more different, because you start getting a lot more differentiation in types of garments that can be worn. And so the particularly stylish overgarments, for instance, aren't going to be reflected in the lower classes. So yeah, the later the Middle Ages wear on, there is more of a divergence. But even still, the silhouettes end up just being basically the same. It's the amount of fabrics, whether there's trains, whether the sleeves are really full, whether it's fully lined in fur, that really it's going to change. Let me see. Do you have any not so historical interests that would surprise people? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love to travel. I love to cruise. I love to cruise, although in fairness, the style of cruising I like is the really elegant vintage style from the 30s, 20s through 40s. That's why I cruise with Cunard. It's one of my favorite ways to travel, because I can get a buffet of different experiences in one trip. And it's a very relaxing style of travel because someone else does everything for me. Someone else cooks, someone else cleans, someone else makes my bed, someone else gives me fresh towels, someone else serves me food, right? I can just focus on enjoying life instead of on all the little niggling menial details of life. So yeah, I love to cruise. But you know, that does combine with my love of history, because I like to cruise in places that have interesting histories. And I like to dress up in beautiful evening gowns every night and that sort of thing. And I do modern dance as well. I do Lindy Hop, modern ballroom, Argentine tango. So yeah, I think those are pretty modern interests. Medieval people weren't known to go on pleasure cruises. They did travel, but it wasn't the kind of pleasure cruise that I'm talking about. Let me see. I'm fascinated with the Byzantine Empire. So the Eastern Roman Empire. Yeah. So just so everyone knows, it was not called the Byzantine Empire in the Middle Ages. They called themselves Romans, even though they spoke Greek. And it was referred to as the Roman Empire by medievals, right? Or the Eastern Roman Empire. I think it was the Victorians. It was either the Georgians or the Victorians, I think, who called it the Byzantine Empire, because Byzantium is the original name of Constantinople, right? But yeah, the Eastern Roman Empire is definitely fascinating. It is interesting to see what actually happens to Rome, because it is the Eastern Roman Empire under the influence of Christianity, and also as time wears on and the old Roman Republican ideals are gone, and how that actually really does ultimately lead to the degradation of the empire. Yeah, so Eastern Roman Empire, what some people call Byzantium, absolutely does interest. It is fascinating. I have been to several prime Byzantine sites, Istanbul, of course, but Ravenna. I've been to Ravenna, and many people have not been to Ravenna. That is honestly, if you want to get a real look at true Constantinople, you need to go, and Byzantium, you need to go to Ravenna, because the churches there are still preserved in their Byzantine original style. And you can really get a sense of what life was like in the Byzantine Empire. It's also where Dante is actually buried. He has an empty tomb in Santa Croce in Florence, but his actual tomb is in Ravenna. He died in exile. It's one of the reasons he writes such mean things about, Florence and the Pope in his Commedia. Yeah, Byzantium is very interesting, and to me, Byzantium is Constantinople, the Eastern Roman Empire, is a very sad story, because it is the story of a decline, right? It is just one long decline. There's some brief moments. Justinian comes in and conquers back most of the Western Roman Empire, but then almost as soon as he's gone, it's gone again. It's lost again. And so, and then bit by bit, the Arabs chip away at it, the Turks chip away at it, and then eventually take it over entirely. The Franks, God damn, the Crusaders, their fellow Christians, go and sack the city in 1204. And that's, for some people say, that is really the end of the Eastern Roman Empire. Like anything after that is just death throes. And that's actually when the Murex production, when Tyrian purple dies out, that's when it dies. When the Franks go and sack Constantinople against their own vow to only wreak violence upon non-Christians, they sack Constantinople, and the Murex plant, the Murex factories, cease operations and never come online again. And I mean online, it's humans doing it, but it's basically an industrialized process at that point. And that's why we have lost the secret of Tyrian purple, and why any attempts to recreate Tyrian purple dye stuffs now are slightly conjectural, because none of that survived. We know nothing from medieval sources about the techniques. We've had to recreate it through experimentation. Yeah, so yeah, Eastern Roman Empire is absolutely fascinating in so many ways. 100%. Robin Hood Men in Tights as a video. Okay, yeah, so Robin Hood Men in Tights. What I like about Robin Hood Men in Tights, one, it is funny, but you have to be aware of like cultural things happening in the world, and specifically in the US, for a lot of Robin Hood Men in Tights to be funny, honestly. Especially the Rodney King beating is referenced. Anyway, I love that it's colorful, right? It's full of colors. The people are wearing colors. It's great. It doesn't feel like a dark, depressing plunge into someone's nightmare. Obviously, the clothes are, for the most part, inaccurate, especially the tights part. When the Robin Hood tales are supposed to have taken place, which is, during the Third Crusade, men were wearing chausses, but those were basically two separate stockings that were bias cut linen or wool that may or may not have been terribly tight fitting, and they would have tied into their braids, so it wouldn't have been tights like we understand it. And they certainly weren't wearing short garments like that in the era of the Third Crusade. Quite the contrary, men were wearing very long garments around the time of the Third Crusade, like in some cases drag on the ground long. So yeah, but it's a funny movie. Yeah, it's definitely a funny movie. A comment: year ago, a friend from Atlantia was working near where I was at the time and introduced me to A Knight's Tale. She said that most of the garments were good except for the female lead. Yeah, so A Knight's Tale. A Knight's Tale I like because it has color, but most of the men, the main character in A Knight's Tale, are wearing absolute garbage. Nothing even a little bit medieval. The three main protagonists, like, I don't know what the hell Paul Bettany is wearing. He's wandering around in his underwear most of the movie, as far as I can tell. Yeah, the clothes worn by the main actors are not even a little bit accurate. No, I would have to go back and watch the scenes of the peoples in the stands to see how accurate they are. A Knight's Tale is funny though, because it's based, it takes the name Ulrich von Liechtenstein, who, as we know from medieval story time, was a real knight who actually went on a quest, on a deed of arm. He actually engaged in errantry in the 13th century in Germany. And yeah, so he was a real person, but he was definitely not the character that is presented in A Knight's Tale 100 plus years after the actual Ulrich von Liechtenstein, 150 years after the real Ulrich von Liechtenstein actually lived. But yeah, A Knight's Tale is funny because in the scene where they have the feast, and the dance master gets up after feast and says, "Would we care for a dance?" He then quotes actual dances that are historical, although not medieval, they're Renaissance. But I was impressed with that. And then the whole dance thing, that weird dance thing they did where Ulrich invented this modern party line dance. Yeah, that was garbage. I remember reading somewhere about there being a few female fools. Yes, there were indeed. There were women who were fools. They were nearly always petite women. Yeah, they were women who suffered from dwarfism generally, and usually they were not a fool to a king. They were the fool to the queen or the countess or the duchess. But yeah, absolutely, the ladies of the court, the ladies regnant, princesses, capital P, definitely had female fools in their entourage. Yeah, that is attested to. Let me see. Okay, so comment about dress class to pick their dresses up in muddy streets. I have no evidence of women of medieval clasps in pre-1500 for women to pick their dresses up when they work in muddy streets. What women would do is they would either wear shoes that were actually slightly elevated to get them out of the mud if the streets were muddy, or they would actually pick their train up and carry it on their arm, or they would kilt their dresses, their skirts through their belt so that it wasn't dragging on the ground. But I've seen zero evidence of a hook or anything like that to hook up a dress pre-1500. Now, if you all have evidence of a dress clasp, like an actual primary source evidence, like a visual or an actual archaeological piece, plus a visual, plus a documentary evidence, I'd be interested in that. I've heard people talk about this before, but I have yet to see a single bit of actual evidence for a dress class pre-1500 in Europe. Have I ever used hemp to make clothing? I absolutely have. I just made a reproduction of a 17th century pair of underdrawers, Korean underdrawers, called dansokot in English or in Korean, that is made out of hemp. And they're very nice. Hemp is a really nice summer fabric. I also have a tolik, which is a sort of modern version of a historical Korean garment dress that is made out of hemp, and it's nice and soft. Yeah, hemp is great. Hemp is a really excellent summer fabric. And I did make my own garment out of them. Can I spell what? Oh, Sadie, good night. Sleep well. Thank you for joining. Oh gosh, I've gotten so behind in the comments. Sorry, everyone. Let me see. Do I have a modern style of dressing too? I absolutely do. If you go to my travels with the Creative Contessa channel, you can see me in all kinds of modern fashion. I have a unique fashion sense, even in my modern clothes. Yeah. No, I don't dress like this all the time. I have a whole nice wardrobe of modern clothes, even though everyone thinks they're vintage clothes, but they're not, they're modern. Yeah, you can, if you go to my Travels with the Creative Contessa channel on YouTube, you can see me in a whole bunch of modern clothes. Yep. Comment, I read that lower class ladies had their hair chopped off before death to sell towards their grave bill sometimes. That's not a medieval practice as far as I know. I've read about that, I think, in the Georgian and the Victorian era, but I haven't read about that in the medieval context. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. I haven't seen the evidence myself. So if you have evidence of women pre-1500 cutting off their hair and selling it to help cover their funeral expenses, let me know. I'd be interested about that evidence. Let's see. Where do I source my materials? Shellback bow. Could you be a little more specific? Are you talking to me? I've gotten behind. I'm sorry. Oh, sewing materials. Okay, good. Good question. Well, because I live in Korea, I have access to Korean markets that have, traditional style markets that have entire sections devoted to craft supplies. So I usually buy my silk thread there. I also get all of my hanbok making materials. So traditional with hemp and rami and silk from there. I buy a lot of my fabrics for my dresses, fabricguru.com. Not a channel sponsor, but they're still an excellent source of high-end silks because Fabric Guru is a proper outlet for interior design fabrics. And the interior decor houses like Ethan Allen's the only one I can pull off the top of my head, but interior design houses use quality fabrics for their interior design clients. And so you can actually get top quality silks at a fraction of the price from their recommended retail price, because upholstery fabrics have to be hard wearing. So they have to be high quality. They have to be densely woven. Now, the nice thing is that very frequently, medieval and Renaissance patterns come back into fashion in the interior decor world, especially because a lot of clients tend to have historical properties in, say, Europe, and they want historical fabrics for their curtains and their walls. So I have found on fabricguru.com very often replica 15th century brocades and damasks. I found silk velvet, really nice silk velvet. I have found silk, plain silk, tabby woven silk that would be used for curtains, etc., and pillows, all for very little money, because apparently below like 100 yards, I think like 70 yards or 80 yards counts as a remnant in the interior design world. So Fabric Guru buys these bolt ends, basically these remnants, and then at a fraction of the price, and then they sell them at a fraction of the price. So fabricguru.com is a great place to look for silk, specifically silk velvet, silk damask, silk brocade, or just plain weave silk. I also buy a lot of fabric on eBay. I especially look for curtains that are silk or linen, and I then use those to make garments, because often you can get really high quality silk or linen curtains on eBay that are either like they were seconds from the factory or they were dead stock, and you can get them at a really good price. I also, of course, when I go to, say, a big 2-week fair like Penzic in Western Pennsylvania, where there's 200 merchants, this I bought from Royal Blue Traders. They are on Instagram if you want to check them out. And I think they have a website too. They sell fabric at fairs and whatnot. And I bought this from them specifically. Yeah, I do. So I source my materials from a wide array of places, but spending a lot of time in Korea as I do buy a lot of my notions here. My silk threads, shears, that sort of thing. I get a lot of that here, which is, I know, a bit like cheating maybe, because I can literally walk to the traditional market, Salmon Market, and buy things. Oh goodness. Okay. Thread and fabric specifically. Great. Jamesy, thank you so much for joining us again. I look forward to seeing you again. Sleep well, my friend. Okay, well, that's okay, because we are coming up on the 3-hour mark. So I'm actually pretty hungry. I haven't eaten yet today, and it's almost it's 2 o'clock our time. So any final questions from you all, my dears? Questions for me, questions about what I do. We will be live streaming tomorrow from Gyeongju. We will be doing a medieval crafting party. I have to look at the train schedule to see what time we'll be getting there and getting set up, because we'll go to one of the historic spots to do it. And so we will get set up there, and then we will do walking tours of the historic sites. We'll go to the reconstruction of the 8th century pleasure palace, Tonggu. We will go to the Gyeongju National Museum again, of course, and I will show you these amazing gold crowns that are literally more than a foot tall. We will take you into the tomb of the heavenly horse, which is a tomb that was excavated in the 70s and 80s and now has been reconstructed so that you can see what it's like to be inside of one of these tombs. You can see exactly how the items were found, because they put replicas of all the items in exactly the way they found them when they actually opened up the tomb. And we'll actually show you the reconstruction process for many of these pieces. And we're just going to show you, there's a historic 600-year-old Hanok village there. We'll be walking around this amazing car-free historic village in Korea, all timber frame, all Hanok, narrow lanes with mud, half timber frame walls all around it. Yeah, so if you're interested in going on site with me, with the Creative Contessa tomorrow, like and subscribe and hit the notification bell and make sure all notifications is triggered. Otherwise, it won't actually let you know all the things I do. It'll only let you know what it thinks you want to see me do. So yeah, big day planned tomorrow. So that should be quite fun. I'm very much looking forward to that. It's going to be another warm day tomorrow. Its temperatures are supposed to be in like the 60s, I think. It's supposed to be 67 Fahrenheit. So that's like 18 degrees Celsius. So it's going to be a beautiful, beautiful autumn day. Really looking forward to getting out and about again. Okay, everyone. Otherwise, there will also be medieval story time coming up, and tonight I might do a medieval cooking tonight. I have to see if I have all the materials for the recipes I want to try. Otherwise, there will be a medieval cooking with the Creative Contessa later on this week at some point. Stay tuned. Keep your eye on the schedule for that. Okay, everyone, just one final check. Oh, look at this. I did talk about CAD file. Oh my goodness. Oh, wait. Oh, wow. My watching was out of sync. Okay. Oh, goodness. I just now got a whole bunch of things. Okay. So I'd like to just thank all of my patrons and channel members and my loyal super chatters, Music for Earthworms, for instance, all of you who actually support my work financially, and all of you who just participate in the live stream, ask questions, leave comments, hit the thumbs up. I really appreciate all of the ways in which all of you contribute. One final question. Do you know Dr. Teresa Emmerich Camper? I do not know who that is. I will openly admit, Adam, I do not know that person. Yep. One final check. Okay. If you have other questions and if you think of them later, if you pop them in the comments, I will answer them. If you're watching this as a recording and you have questions, pop them in the comments and I will answer them. Otherwise, I hope to see you all tomorrow in Gyeongju, everyone. Stay creative and have a lovely morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Bye, everyone. Oh, and music, I'll let Ryan know that you loved the loop music, and I'll tell him he needs to play longer next time. Bye, everyone.